1, 2, testing 1, 2. Okay.
Come on, dog. This thing doesn't do it?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it did.
You
That
did
did
it?
it, yeah.
Oh, you did the little latch.
Yeah.
got a lot on the agenda, and a lot of people want to be a lot of places after this, so keep moving quickly. I don't have the official agenda up here yet, but I'll start, pass the meeting over to,
Allison, do you want my hotspot again?
we're gonna, we've got some big presentation for the budget tonight, and then also we're gonna talk about the calendar. If there's some announcements, they're on the, you can read those on board docs. We're gonna start off with the student report this evening, so not Gus and Sabine, not to throw you right into it, but I'm gonna throw you right into it. And pass it over to you.
Sure. Okay. So spring sports start next week, and there have been interest meetings, open gyms, and preseason practices in the past couple weeks, so everyone's kind of getting excited and getting ready for the next season. Seniors will be receiving their final college admissions decisions within the next month.
Cool.
So good luck to all of them. And several students have mentioned to me, and I think it also came up in SU, that they want to keep mask breaks even though the school is now test optional. And a little bit of personal connection, AP Psych today, we're studying memory. And we learned about something called the serial position effect, I think it's called, which is saying like, in terms of what you remember in a class, it's kind of like a reverse bell curve. So you remember what was said first and last, but having a break in the middle kind of breaks it up, so the bell curve becomes smaller. So that is, I think, why Mr. Conweiser is keeping the mask breaks, even though there are only a few kids in my class that are still wearing masks. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was an interesting connection.
So it's really just a break.
Yes.
For
but
memory
For
purposes.
sure,
Right,
too.
memory. No, I
It
love
is
it.
nice.
It's a great
Yeah.
idea.
All right, I guess I can take this off now, right? Just so weird.
It's optional, yeah.
Has to be said. So first off, congratulations to the basketball teams on both of their incredibly successful seasons. Girls and boys both did an amazing job, and there was a really big turnout for all the playoff games. And our student section was super spirited, a lot of cheering, and it's just really special to see sort of the community come together and support those teams. This transition to mask optional, from what I've seen, I think from what Sabine's seen, has been really, really successful. I think people are really compassionate in the way they're interacting with others who may or may not be wearing those masks, and the teachers. I know I feel like I sort of put it on or take it off depending on how many people are wearing masks in the room.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of people are wearing it, I don't want to make them uncomfortable, I'll put it on. I've heard a lot of this sort of similar things for people. People are pretty comfortable sort of moving around with it, and teachers are doing a really good job of sort of embracing the optionalness of it. And yeah, I think that's going really well. It's a transition. Feels weird not to have it, but I think people are really excited to see the bottom half of everyone else's face. All right, so what else do I have here? So the student union response to the drug and alcohol survey. Everyone was super excited and engaged talking about the results of the survey, which Sabine and I shared. I think everyone was pretty focused on coming up with some solutions. You couldn't really come to a consensus about anything, but I think people are really passionate and focused on keeping thinking about those questions and eventually coming up with some ways to help that. We did talk about creating more options for people to get involved in clubs and sports. Apparently, somewhere in the Google sphere, there is a document that has a list of all the clubs, but I don't know where it is, and I doubt anybody else does. So I'm going to try and find it. That's what Mr. McCann and Mr. Scotch with the SU advisor said. I'll find it, and we can create like a website or something that's way more accessible. But I think everyone was sort of agreed that that's super important, and we can keep working on that. The SU currently, sort of on that note, is working on a ton of sort of school spirit activities for people to get involved. We got that badminton tournament coming up. The freshmen are hosting a grade-wide volleyball tournament, which we're super excited for. And then, a bunch of spring events are coming up as well. I think was there anything else from that meeting? It was a pretty eventful meeting that I'm forgetting.
I think that's a good summary.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah,
All right, that is all I've got.
yeah, thank you.
Great. Dr. McCursey, Damaris and Dr. McCursey and I are on the communications committee. Maybe we can figure out later in our next meeting about how we could help them with the clubs and putting them online or something.
Sure. I mean, I think a good start would be working there and working at the building level, but
Yeah.
certainly we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I do know, because Mr. A and I were in a meeting with some members of the student union last week, and they brought up the mask break, and I know we're actually already on top of that from what was said, we are building, go ahead.
We spoke as a faculty. To your point, Doreen, we're not calling them mask breaks anymore, they're just breaks. But many teachers felt they liked the breakup of the class. It's an 80 minutes, a long time. They've adjusted their lessons appropriately. So many teachers are still doing breaks. As far as the club list, I think it's online. I think it already is online, is what I was fiddling on my phone. But it was a collaborative effort between PTSA and the SU, and they developed this spreadsheet that had all the advisors, meeting times, who the president, vice president of the clubs are, and so forth. But I'll find it, but we'll work on that.
Yeah, we can make, I'm sure we can.
Yeah.
It's in one of the Spider-Verses
Okay.
of the internet.
It's
out
actually
there.
under high school activities clubs. Yeah, so if you just
It was up
go,
there somewhere.
it's just the high school, and then under menu, it says activities, and then it says clubs, and all the club information is spelled out there, so.
Well,
Yeah,
we
so
like
I guess
that-
just making sure that it's up to date and
Yeah.
with all the clubs, but,
I like
Yeah.
that positive spin to that student report.
And I
Thank
do
you.
like the empirical-based reasoning for a break. That was
Absolutely.
the first we heard.
right.
It's a little
So-
rough, I just learned it today.
that
but
was
good.
I
You're-
did learn it right after the.
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that we now have
Double
an
curve.
empirical-based
Right.
reason to do this.
I like that something positive came out of the pandemic things that are happening. He discovered something that's helpful. That's great.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Great report. All right, we've got budget presentation now. And I will pass the meeting over to Maureen and Bill to kick us off.
Probably over the window?
So strange.
Yeah.
It's like Florida weather outside.
Is it supposed, is the temperature supposed to drop? I don't know.
Just a little.
Yeah, maybe not today.
It's a big one, going to the lectern.
It is a big one. So can you hear me? And do you mind if I don't have the mask on?
No problem.
That's great.
Just make sure, just the computer that's running this is okay.
I point here,
Yep,
okay.
perfect. What?
So we sent to the board, and it's now going into the public record, because it's been in the executive record for the board, quite a substantial deck on this part of the budget. Maureen and I have been rehearsing this. I'm looking at the clock, and my view is, as I view PowerPoints for something as significant as a budget, and I do understand from Maureen that you as a board will get a full board budget book shortly, which a lot of the elements of this will be in. But in my view, for a public board and a public realm, decks like this need to stand alone. So there's a lot of detail in here, and it's exactly not the kind of deck you want to use in your courses, because it's too detailed. But we will not go word by word or line by line. So we're going to try and hit big parts of this. Some of it's a repeat, but again, this is a standalone document. It needs to be there when people go looking to say, there it is. I want to thank the administrators for coming out again tonight to hear this. So I'll be the master of the words, in charge of the words. Maureen will step up around the dollars. So here's where we are in this process. The checks make clear, not money checks, but the checks make clear where we are. And we're today on March 7th. As everyone knows, a board grapples with a budget, a board adopts a budget, and then the village has to weigh in through its various authorities. And so we really won't know the final piece of this budget, the final decision on this budget till May. This presentation has a front part, which we're calling review. That's the three items you see there, budget purpose down through enrollment and class size projections. Those were in the previous presentation, which, to be clear, that was the February 7th presentation. but that's a review of those first three. We still want these in here. What's new tonight is what's in the instructional budget, and there are 5 major sections. The real big story is within special education, and we want to do this within a flow, but there's not just a budget element to that, but a very significant statement on the program there. And I want to thank Laura and Tess who are here for working with us on this, as well as the rest of the administrators. And the special ed whole team did get a verbal update on that earlier today, because I firmly believe, and I think the board agrees, that staff affected by a budget should hear about it first. We then had an optional meeting for staff, faculty later, but it was very important to me, this, particularly the special ed part of this, that group did hear about it verbally, and they know this now. This deck will be available to them. The purpose of the budget, now we're into review. I think everything up there you have seen before as a board, but I would say there is a new bullet. We're needing to underscore that middle bullet to advance student growth in the midst of COVID-19 impact. There is not a negative word in there. It's about advance, it's about growth, and it's about impact. Because as the board's been learning, we've actually done very, very well, thanks to the people to my left and to Melissa and others, that we've had some students naturally struggle to get to the level they should, but we've been largely maintaining our progress academically, and our social emotional has been strong, though we know we can do better there. In terms of the budget goals, again, this is a review for you as a board. I don't need to, since it's a review, repeat this, but it's just really, this is for all students. We're maintaining our core programs and resources. Professional learning is a key part of this. Let me flag the invest in facilities, because a good proportion of the budget increase, and maybe about 1/3 of the budget increase, is tied to the bond, which, if I'm understanding things, is a wee bit of a rookie here in Hastings. That bond ties to 3 major capital improvements, all of which will complete, I think, this year. As I said to the staff, I wish I was so lucky to have been the one to decide on those things, because they are going to be vast, vast improvements for Hastings, for all students, for a long, long time. So that 6% in growth or so that's in this budget, a large share of that is because of the bond payments coming online. And so that's an annual payment on a long-term benefit. So I just want to stress that here. Also, we're working within the tax levy cap. So while it's significant growth, we've worked really hard to keep this growth within the cap provided to us by the state. Drivers of expenses, no change since the board last saw this a month ago. But again, it's in the public record. Those who are coming first to this document can see this. Good news on the health insurance side. We're all looking for good news where financial pressures are upward, which every day now we know it's just more of a challenge for us. But health insurance has been a place of less growth, so that's been a plus for us. And I've already talked about the capital projects in depth. But I do want the board and the community to understand a large reason for 6% increase this year is because we now have to start paying on what are a long-term benefit around the capital needs. So now they're numbers, which means Maureen steps up.
Thank you. So as Bill had said, we have reviewed this information with everyone earlier. Again, this is just to remind everyone where we are in terms of our overall budget-to-budget growth, $3.5 billion. Currently, we're proposing, which is actually tax compliant when you look at the revenue side, and you can see that the levy would need to increase about a little bit over 4% to support this budget. Again, we reviewed at earlier sessions, and we're grateful for our increase in state aid. But again, with the way the budget is growing on the expenditure side, although happy to see some of those revenue numbers going up, still need to have a relatively significant increase in our levy to support this spending plan. On the bottom, just to again highlight, because of an increased assessed valuation, again, which is given to us by the Office of Real Property Services at the state, even with an increase of the levy, the tax rate because of an increased assessment is actually showing negative, if anyone is questioning why that looks that way. Again, we're not going to, this is just a breakdown and review of those other areas of revenue, a little bit more detailed under the other. We've reviewed these earlier, but they're in the deck for those who may be interested to review those numbers. The tax cap, we've gone over. The tax cap formula is given to us by the state. There's much of it is the same for all districts. There's some district-specific exemptions that are plugged in based on a formula. What does that all mean for us next year? It means that our budget to be tax cap compliant next year could increase, our taxes could increase by 1.9 million. Currently, the spending plan we've shown you earlier, we're approximately about 60,000 or so under that cap currently in our proposal. Much of this we went over before, and again, this is just a reminder that revenue, although even with increases from Albany, it's just a constant struggle because as we all know, that the majority, at least in Hastings, falls primarily on homeowners, and that will always be a challenge for us, and that's what makes creating spending plans particularly challenging for us. The enrollment and class size projections, I was thinking, Bill, I think we reviewed this at the Budget 101, but we didn't do it, I think, the last time for the board, but just a bit here, yeah. So this is a bit more detailed, but again, some of this you'll see when we unpack the numbers of the budget. Right now at Hillside Elementary School, we are projecting a decrease of one section there, and you can see where our current sections are and what our proposed, based on our enrollment numbers, look like next year. In addition to one less section at, in the K-4 level, we're also going to be, have a section of reduction of a communications class. So when we go into the actual details on the budget, you'll see how the impact of those reductions. And we do have some retirements, so much of these will be done by just attrition. Again, at Farragut Middle School, a little bit different story here. The enrollment, although it's not significantly up over the middle school, we are seeing an increase in the 8th grade sections and actually a decrease in the current 5th grade. So currently this year we have 6 sections of 5th grade. Next year 6 sections of 5th grade. Next year we're proposing 5 sections of 5th grade. But that decrease of enrollment at 5th grade is mainly absorbed by what is needed at the other places in the middle school, 6 through 8. And we're also seeing some shifts in some of the music, art, library, and some of those others between buildings as there is an increased need in the 8th grade section. But again, these are all budget neutral because we've been able to accomplish some efficiencies throughout the district in order to support that increase in the 8th grade. High school these numbers again, they're some of the numbers may shift a bit, but this is overall the FTE count at the high school for next year, which is going to remain the same for the most part. This is again just our 5-year projected enrollment. You can kind of see here that we're consistently kind of going up at that 2% kind of number, a couple years flat or a little bit less, but again, it's showing that kind of consistent growth that we've been seeing the last 10 years or so, and how that'll filter down into the middle school and high school over the next few years. And again, that's just a graph of that. Now we're going to get into the details, the actual budget details for each department under the instructional portion of the budget, starting with curriculum. Here, again, this is just contractual increases for the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction in her office, which is the Assistant Superintendent as well as the support person in there. And again, you can see that the increase is just mostly driven on contractual obligations. Under the area of instruction here, again, I just want to highlight some of the changes that we're seeing here. So in the first couple lines, there's a few reasons that we're seeing those year-to-year dollars decreasing in the salary, the K-6 and 7-12 salary lines. There's 3 things that are going on there. We have a reduction in section, as I had mentioned earlier, at the elementary level. We have a few retirements. We also do have some federal money that we are able to use to bring down some of our budget numbers for next year, which is some of that money that, as you know, we applied for last year. In addition to that, with federal reporting, we were required to pull our salaries for our teachers who are English language learner teachers and put that in a separate part of the budget. So there'll be some slides, a few slides later, you'll then see that there's actually, it's about $300,000 so of salaries that had to be pulled out of these numbers and stand alone in its own budget. So some of it is just really a shift of expenses, and some of it is actually reductions based on actuals and federal funds and things. So right now, as you can see in the first two lines, so we are projecting from a budgetary standpoint some dollar decreases there. The other lines that are going up, again, based upon, if you look at the middle actual columns, the last few years, even before the pandemic, we're seeing an increase in both substitute and leave replacement costs for when people are out. And as you can see, we've adjusted the budget accordingly, as well as teachers are now paid, which kind of started, I believe, this fiscal year to cover classes, and you can see the costs associated with that. And then, some other kind of increases there where, underneath the salary lines and what the cost is for those items. And then I'm going to turn it over to Bill now because, and he'll highlight the one line here.
Yeah, so strategic planning is listed here. That's really what we're calling Portrait of a Hastings Graduate. We won't use the phrase strategic planning much because it comes with such a negative connotation way beyond Hastings. As I shared with the board last month, it feels like it was last month, maybe 2 weeks ago, Ted Dintersmith, when asked about strategic planning, said that's where good ideas go to die. So this effort is very clear to the board. It's in other documents, but that's there for about $45,000. The RFP is out now as of last week with a deadline of March 25th for proposals. And then that simple bullet at the bottom takes the place of lots of words to say that we will have an interactive, inclusive process, we hope starting off in May 2022. The board will be very active in that, as will a wide array of members of the community, both within the district and outside the district. But I would say this is the right name, it is the right title, synonymous much better with North Star process than with strategic planning. And this idea of what students should know and be able to do really is the coin of the realm out there.
Yes, and then on this particular slide, Melissa Szymanski is again just going to highlight some of the increases here that are falling under the BOCES portion of the budget for curriculum and development and professional learning.
So just generally speaking, when we're talking about my budget lines, we're really looking at three main areas. One is professional learning, one is partnership with outside organizations, and another is curriculum development. And so just to take you through, there's a lot that's happening within the district in the areas of professional learning. So when we're looking at mathematics alignment, we've partnered with Kathy Williams from UCubed, and that work is continuing, it's ongoing, it's going very well. We've been working, we are actually entering into a partnership with Liz Mira. Our beloved Helen Pashley, who's been supporting us with our science alignment, has retired. And so some of the professional learning can be offset with either grant monies or with partnership from the Edith Winthrop Teacher Center, but some of it is ours and needs to be accounted for and folded into the budget. So mathematical alignment, we have summer work. So when we're thinking about even that third bullet around curriculum development, teachers do need to be compensated for the fine work that they're doing after school hours and over the summer. And so we've allocated for some key areas that are related not only to increase alignment with the standards, but with consideration of the curriculum review cycle that we're developing and what we're prioritizing and what needs to be happening internally based on our priorities and values. So that includes culturally responsive curriculum work. Some early conversations have happened with the middle school ELA department to take a look and start doing some inquiry, some analysis around working with data. Social studies is interested in exploring the civics seal. Science articulation work, as I mentioned. Art alignment, we do have new art standards, so some work over the summer related to that. Recently I presented on, Maureen and I presented on the computer science and digital fluency standards work that's upcoming based on the new technology plan. And there's some work that needs to occur with world languages. Meetings, there are a number of paid meetings that teachers are compensated for as well. When we think about some other curriculum instruction lines, just thinking about speakers, thinking about the Race Matters Committee, the Multicultural Book Fair, faculty book groups, high school affinity groups, school presentations, racial literacy work. So all of that is folded into my budget lines as well. And then finally, when we're thinking about our partnership with BOCES, Gravity Goldberg has been a key partner for us, particularly at the elementary school with the ELA work. Next year has been earmarked for Hillside Early Elementary Word Study. Based on the work that's been happening this year, Words Their Way with upper elementary, some dedicated focus will need to go K2, like the lower end of the spectrum. And then we have curriculum council memberships, workshops for administrators and teachers through BOCES, and that includes APPR recertification training for our administrative team. That has to happen every single year so that they can conduct supervision evaluation through the APPR cycle. And then other memberships like the Tri-State Consortium. This year, we've earmarked some additional funding. We are exploring a partnership with Facing History and ourselves and deepening that. So we are in an exploratory phase right now, but we would be remiss not to earmark some funding for that. So that is another thing that I wanted to highlight. So that's where we are in my line. And the partnership with outside organizations, as I mentioned, so things like our Tri-State Consortium colleagues and thinking about model schools membership. This is really allowing us access to professional learning work and partnership with key organizations who hold a really high bar for continuous improvement.
If I wanted to try to find numbers related to those areas, they're pushed into the budget in other places?
They're in-
If you break it into 3 areas the way you have it in this page, how would someone try to find the general idea of those
I
3
can show
numbers?
you where
Is
they
that
are.
coming up
Yeah.
later?
No, so I can show you, so in terms of when she spoke about the teacher's work, when we'll start with curriculum
Or like,
development.
yeah, curriculum
That is
development?
2110, 150, and 151, which are curriculum development and staff development, some of which are for meetings, some of which are for summer work.
There it is,
So
150,
that's just to
151.
pay teachers, and then there's also the 152 line that says meeting attendance that Melissa spoke about.
Yep.
So those 3 lines are just related to paying, teachers to do that type of work.
Thank you.
Then on 2110, 400, there's a bunch of different lines here that you can pick up on. There's the Race Matters Committee.
That's where it all is.
There's Tri-State Consortium, Superintendent's Conference Days. I'm like just reading the ones you would look at.
No,
Staff
you
development.
pointed me in the right area,
Okay,
thank
and
you.
then under 490, Jeremy, which is this part. then
490.
There's the remainder, because anything that's paid, partnered through BOCES has to sit in the 490.
In
code. It's a
BOCES.
requirement.
Some of them are in supervision too, though, right?
There is, but the majority of them are kind of in the teaching portion of the budget, although there is a lesser.
What's professional under supervision? That's not,
Oh, supervision, that's the principals. That's the-
2020, 150? Oh, that's just the principal.
No, that's
Okay,
the
so
principal
not professional
salaries, yeah.
development. Okay.
This is all anything that's a 400 codes, anything with 100 means we're paying somebody, anything with a 400 is a contractual expense.
Maureen,
Yes.
You mentioned Race Matters. How does isn't it what HEF funds or that's?
No, that's our
That's different?
contribution,
Right,
yeah.
have sometimes funds things as long as a grant is put in. So that's different. So we have a line that's a district budget line, and sometimes HEF and PTSA, depending on grants that are submitted, would be above and beyond what sits
So they
within our
add to
budget.
it.
That's
So
right.
this is part of a budget item, but they can add to it.
That's right.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so then the next portion of the budget, again, these are based upon our required coding of these type of expenses, is the supervision. This reflects it's the principals and the assistant principals and any of the folks who work within their offices, and this line represents the budget for that particular area. And as you can see, the increase here is driven mostly on contractual increases, and there has been a bit of a shift in terms of staffing, in terms of the secretarial staff, in terms of one person was split before, now they're fully in the high school. And it's just an adjustment there. Instructional media, this is the library. This is our two media library specialists and any aides that work in that area to help supervise, and the books and things like that. And again, you can see it's a small increase driven primarily on contractual obligations. Instructional technology, I'll start and then you can jump in.
Sure.
So instructional technology, this represents any internal staff members who work supporting technology, which is primarily technology aides, our CIO, and we do have a data specialist that's also reflected here, our data manager. And then most of technology, we do partner with BOCES and they provide the majority of the oversight, and we purchase most of our services through them. The good news about that, I just want to highlight, and this goes for all of the services we purchase through BOCES, which I should have said when we spoke, what Melissa just highlighted. When we purchase goods and services through BOCES, we receive back about 50 to 60% reimbursement the following year. So when we look at our budget, a good portion, like as an example, this year we're receiving $1 million of our state aid payment is reimbursements based upon participation with BOCES, which is based on how much we spend with them. So any of the numbers here that speak to BOCES, like as an example, in the technology line where I believe that total says, it's about $1 million between the equipment lease and the 722 above that. Next, the following year after this budget year, we'll receive back approximately $500,000 on that service. So the state wants incentivize districts to do these shared services because they are better financially for taxpayers. That's why they incentivize by providing aid back on those expenditures. But I think it's good because then as you look at these numbers, just keep that in the back of your head that we do receive. It would be, the reason I say that it'd be very difficult for us to do that without that support, meaning we would not be able to, manage that cost.
So is the money we get back a line item someplace else?
It's in the aid.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I could break, in our budget book, you'll see it's actually a standalone. When we break down the state aid, there's components of state aid, one of which is BOCES state aid.
Got it.
So when we talk about that, that budget number of $6 million, about $1 million of that is driven solely on how much we spend with BOCES. So I think that's an important, it's a smart way to do technology because they also have the expertise because they support so many districts. We have many layers of support, but it also provides us that revenue stream back to us. So that, and then Melissa's going to highlight the online database library software line here and just give you some idea about the increase
So
there.
you're seeing some increase there, and actually that reflects more accurately our actuals. And a big reason why that is because over the summer, there was a diagnostic screening committee that came together and made a final decision around Star Renaissance, and that's not an inexpensive resource in terms of supporting children. And so that happened after the budget season, and so we took that on, so that's part of the expense. Some of the additional increase is reflective of, just basically software increases through BOCES. Every year we would expect that there's a slight increase for the software applications. So those are the two big things. Panorama was a slight increase because of the SEL piece. We wanted to make sure that that was in there too. But a majority of it is really that Star Renaissance, and just it's reflective closer to what our actuals are.
And then the other highlight just here, and again, it's a minimal increase. I've mentioned or explained this in the past. When we do larger technology project overhauls, updates, when things come end of life, such as this upcoming summer, it'll be the wireless. It is now end of life. It's actually beyond end of life. We're able to do equipment leases with BOCES, which help us to manage. We wouldn't do that for something that was a cheaper piece of equipment, but the larger kind of things that have maybe a 7 to 10 year life expectancy, we typically lease those through BOCES, which helps us manage it budgetarily. So this upcoming year, we're anticipating some general replacements and the overhaul of our Wi-Fi system, which is reflected in there, which again is not a large increase, but is the way we work to handle those type of items. And that's just reflective here about what the cost is around those larger type projects that are slated to be done this year.
So this is duplicative of the couple.
Well,
slides
it's,
before.
yeah, what it is it's embedded in that equipment lease number, so there's, you know, that's, by doing these equipment leases, it helps us manage some of these larger ticket items and ensure that the integrity of our technology is always up to date.
And I just wanted to mention too, during the recent technology plan, you know, we also have an allocation based on making alignment to the computer science digital fluency standards actionable, and we mentioned that, you know, based on that investment plan over 3 years.
I have a quick question. So most of what we are talking about falls under, I'm looking at the major drivers of expenses. And we have the enrollment, contractual programs, pension, health, insurance, and capital projects. So what we are talking about is all under the programs, right? I'm trying to sort of, the
Right.
instruction, the okay.
Yeah.
I want to sort of highlight which is which.
So we have a significant presentation within a presentation here, and we purposely put it in order, but special ed. After this, there isn't a lot left to talk about tonight. But it's really important that as superintendent, I speak to special ed. Laura and Tester have been excellent leaders within special ed in collaboration with, I guess I surprised you, I knocked the camera over. So Laura's making sure we know she's here, so. There are 4 parts to this. I'll move through it quickly. These slides are quite detailed, and that's because I want the public record here and the information that we can keep going back to now and long term. But we're talking about advancing what we do for Hastings students and professionals. So we're suggesting that yes, it's students first, and if we're not also thinking about our professionals, we're missing something, because it's the quality professionals who really help us, particularly within district, maximize what we can do within special education, and hopefully convince more students who can stay in the district to stay in the district. And there may be some who may come back, you know, if that's possible. We'll talk about the SPED budget overview quickly. Those are the actual numbers. Then come to some important administration and staff modifications for this year. There's a particular linchpin there, which we do want to emphasize. And then lastly, a real forward-looking effort, a strategic step as we call it. So I want to emphasize a set of guidelines for us, what our commitment is. You can see it up there. I won't belabor it, but this is really important. This is what we'll keep coming back to check, particularly those first 3 bullets, that this is a moral, ethical, and I don't want to have to say legal, but it's a moral and ethical commitment to do well by students. And because over history we've not done well on the moral and ethical, that's why there's a very strong legal framework. The SPED experts tell me that legal framework is necessary. Sadly, districts across the nation have required there to be a legal framework. But you see it's third on our list. If we're right morally and ethically, you know, we don't need to get to that legal piece, but there is a framework we have to pay attention to. Inclusion is critical in that second bullet, and particularly with the administrative change we're talking about. We want to really embed the priority of inclusion right at the top. It's been there already, but really to solidify that with our management team. And continuous improvement matters. So the immediate steps to foster this commitment are in what's this year's budget. And some might say, well, a few of these changes wait on. We're saying no. There are a few of these things you need to get after. We have to get after this year. And then the third part is what are the strategic steps to foster the commitment. So I just wanted Maureen to highlight here a few parts of this budget, and then I'll step back up to address what some of these pieces really mean.
Right, so we felt this was a good time just to kind of give you an overview of the special education budget. Again, as I think we've shared this earlier, this is a portion of the budget that we are, it is increasing significantly or proposed to increase significantly for next year. And, you know, what we're seeing obviously here on the slide, there's a couple highlights I will provide around some of the drivers of that increase. The first one I think that's significant on the screen is twofold. It's the 225400, which is the contract services. I do want to highlight in here, although the majority of that increase is for students in district and costs related to out-of-district providers, that's what that line item is for both our OT and some other things that we do contract out for, behavioral ABA services and things such as that. But in addition to that, part of that increase is being driven by having a private school that's within our domain, which is the Hudson Lab School. And when students attend the Hudson Lab from other school districts, we are the district of residence. We are required to provide services if the children need them and provide, I think the IEP you have to develop for them, or you're involved in
We're
that.
actually the district of location.
Of location, that's it, not resident,
We
right?
develop an IESP,
Uh-huh.
so
It's related services.
Right, related services.
we have, right now, we have over 10 students that are attending there. We have 3 initials still coming up, which could be a potential 13. And out of those 6 out of those 10 are not our students.
Right. So because of that, the reason, I just wanted to highlight some of that increase, for some of the students that are there have some specialized services. So about $100,000 or so of that increase is driven by the students out of district that are attending there. We are able to bill back those districts for those services, but I will say that even beyond that, the man hours that are put in on this, like in the district to, do the extra work would not be something that was covered. So when we talk about other things in terms of strains on people's time, that is just, I just wanted to highlight that and also give you a little bit of a more breakdown of the increase of that number as we see it as a significant, almost 60% increase there.
Which line
Help us
item is that?
understand
Sorry.
Why we can't bill the man hours back?
Correct.
Yeah, how much do we
Well,
recoup?
what I'm saying is I think there's a certain amount of man hours, like as an example, like even for myself, I can't,
Contract
you could
service.
speak to yours, but I know like when I had to secure that other position, which I don't want to speak about because it's about, there's individual students that, there's so few students there. You could, I guess, but like as an example, like initially in trying to secure the staff as the students were coming in, there's times in which we have to hire different support staff are there, so it goes through like a whole management process, but we have not done that so far. I guess theoretically we could, but typically we don't get billed back from other districts for the back office costs. So it's sort of like, we're also, don't receive bills with back office costs. But for us, it was just another, having the private school there, it was just, another kind of driver of some of these increases, so. Currently, we're not billing them back for those expenses, but it's not typical that you would.
A quick question, with Hudson Lab, what ages or grades do they cover?
I think they're currently like K, maybe 6. I think when they opened, they were initially like K1, 2, and then during the pandemic, I think their plan was to expand. And
I think they're going up to 8 right now.
Are they going to, yeah.
They've expanded substantially, and I think they expand based on their enrollment. So if they have a child that's in 8th grade, then they go to 8th grade.
Do you know what their enrollment is or what it looks like?
It only may be like 30 or 40, because we may in the future provide them a full-time nurse too. But this year, I actually did try to secure them a part-time nurse, but we've been kind of supporting them afar because it was difficult to find any nurse. I mean, we couldn't find nurses to hire for our building. So it was impossible to find nurses. Because again, that's another requirement outside of special ed, we are required to provide other services. Although it's fine when we can build back the other districts, but there are quite a few of our Hastings students who attend that school too. So it's just like another expense for us.
So I'm asking, I think I may be repeating those questions. So we can bill them, but we don't do it.
No, we do bill them, I'm sorry.
Okay,
We
got
bill
it.
them for the OT, nurses, other type speech and things like that. But if I'm spending 30 hours, I didn't bill them back, because districts, we also have students like that who attend other districts that also, that they do the same process. I just kind of just highlighting it, A, as part of the increase, and B, just saying that it's I'm not trying to, it's just when there are private schools in the district, it does create more work for everybody in the home district.
So
Doesn't matter.
we pay then some schools like maybe Windward or Ursuline or
Yes, we
Holy Name or
pay
whatever.
White Plains as an example.
Yeah, so we have to pay that. And
Well, that's a little different,
where
but
are
like
those
private
lines?
schools, like when kids go to Hackley, they go to
Yeah.
master's school, we have to pay Dobbs Ferry for whatever services they provide to the students who attend masters, if they
Right.
need services.
Got it.
But we still pay for the nurse for that school too.
Yeah, so where would what
That's
we
not
pay
there.
to others, where does that fall?
Well, it's under health services billing, so.
I mean, like the special, I'm speaking specifically about special
Special ed
ed.
is not, I would say that Hudson Lab is, I don't want to, most of our children who attend private schools out of district are not children who receive services. If they
So
attend a
Windward, we don't have to pay
No,
them?
because that's,
A separate
it's
thing.
included in
Yeah,
there.
got
It
it.
would be like if we had a child in Masters.
Yeah,
But
got
we-
it.
currently, we don't have any children in Masters that have special education.
I see.
But we do pay for like jobs for the nurse that, for
Right.
if kids attend there, as an
Okay,
example.
thanks.
Just so
Actually,
everyone understands the, does it show up on miscellaneous receipts as far as the income?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's 100,000 or so?
Yes.
400? Okay.
Mhm. Yep. Okay, so, so then, some of the other drivers here we'll see, we're seeing a slight reduction in, tuition-related services, which are non-BOCES. Out-of-district placements is a slight decrease, based upon actual. Our actuals this year are a bit lower. And we also, I believe, have some children graduating. So we're seeing a reduction there. We are seeing an increase in the settlement line. I will also just want to highlight here, if we didn't have the reserve set up, this number would be substantially higher. So if, after this year, if we're not able to replenish that reserve, that line would have had to, I believe it was budgeted initially at $850,000. But with the money we had left over in the reserve that we established last year, we were able to bring that down to $550. And then again, the other increases here we're seeing are for students that are projected to go out to BOCES and career and technical services. We will be breaking down a little bit more detail. There are some reductions that we're anticipating for both teacher aide and teacher assistants, based on programmatic, some students that are no longer with us and who are no longer going to be attending the district next year. So those are in the salary lines. There's some net numbers there too, but
Do you
all
know-
said and done, we're about $1 million up there.
So for instructional salaries, do you know offhand how many people that is?
It's one less than we currently have. Because
Like-
we have one.
Total number.
Total number, I'm sorry. Total number less. Let me think what the FTEs are there.
We can get
It's gonna be
I can get it for you.
Okay.
We can get an answer.
And then I'm just curious also, so like for the classes that are K through 5, where it's the integrated classrooms, does that salary come out of here for
Yes.
that teacher? It's
Any-
not in
and
the,
all
it's not in the
special
teacher
ed-
salary?
Yes, so all of this, we'll definitely provide you the breakdown, we'll make a note of that, and that's pretty easy to pull out, the FTEs per building. That line, the instructional salary line for that includes all special education teachers. Laura Tessa, like, they would also be included in that line, that's how they have to be reported. It's different than principals who have kind of a standalone code. So it includes all of our teachers, and then the other lines, you can see they're labeled. The next line would be the teacher assistants who work in those classrooms, and then the non-instructional salaries are for the office and the aides
Yeah.
for that department.
I was just thinking about the forward thinking, not necessarily for this year, but.
Yes, yeah, we're gonna get, I'm sorry,
Okay.
I think once Bill gives a lot more detail, a lot of these
Got it.
other things
Great.
will be
Maureen,
answered.
so I'm sorry, just one quick question. On 490,
Yep,
is that large increase, is that just driven by tuition, the number of
Students,
students
yeah.
increase?
and, just as you know, or some, you may not know, occasionally, like, it could be 1 or 2 students that could, depending on the program, right, for any of those lines.
And that idea of one student matters, because I think one of the fundamentals to understanding, which many of you do, but one of the fundamentals to understanding gen ed and special ed is individually based. It's rooted in the individual, and so even financially, almost everything up there ties back to an individual. Whereas the rest of the budget, you can think in groups, 10, 12, 15 in a class, something like that. It's not a perfect, but often it really helps people brand new to how do I understand what's happening
Up and down
here.
a lot.
And it's going to set up what I'm about to say, which is really, really important. So the reason we kept this detail here and kind of force you into the detail is that it really sets up the following. That this is why we think right now, tied to previous recommendations, it is really important to add a second assistant director for SPED. Often what is happening as you try and manage this at the management level, administrative level, because you have people directly with students, busy with students as they have to be, is that often what's happening now to manage it well is too much work for too few people. So as good as Laura and Tessa are, when this is so driven by the individuals, so 300 some students, that's largely a set of individual activity. And so you've got people working directly, but then who's actually holding this all together, looking down the road, thinking about it, as we'll show you in a second, as is the case in many, many places, particularly as inclusion has become that much more important in special education. The management structures you've had have, as good as they are, the people, have not been sufficient to keep pace with what's happening. So we are suggesting a second assistant director to be based at Hillside, not just focused on Hillside, with an assistant director in Farragut. Unlike some places, it wouldn't be grade specific, but still to provide more support there. We would be returning the teacher inclusion facilitator to the classroom, but we think even making that role of inclusion that much more important, because you'll see in a second, it's already been really important to the director and assistant director, but really solidify it within our management processes. We will continue the SPED coordinators. Late last week, there was some back and forth internally as to whether we continue those. We are going to continue those at Schedule B. If I get through the rest of this, and maybe we can talk through questions, would be best. Okay. And then we are discontinuing the SPED department chair. That's the Schedule B. We are going to be, as Maureen mentioned, reviewing teacher aide and assistant levels as we get further into this year, because there may be some natural efficiencies there, and that's right at the classroom level. But these are the administration and staff modifications. We want to focus in on the assistant director, because that's the big change here. And back in 2017, not that long ago, the Urban Collaborative made a set of very significant recommendations to the district. Now, in our time, there have been several superintendents since 2017, so how much has the district been able to focus on this is a good question. Leadership within have been able to, but the top team has not really been able to focus substantially on many of these recommendations. So right now, we're bringing these back to the fore to say it's really important to at least focus on 4 of these major recommendations. And again, you've got great work in your director, great work in your assistant director, backed up by the building administrators, et cetera. But as you look through those recommendations, you don't have to look too far to start to say, relative to the demands of the work currently, we are racing to keep up. And you particularly see this when you look at, I would say, these 5, 6 major overarching areas. One, as I've mentioned, is have an assistant director in each of the complexes, not solely that's their own focus. But second, pick up much more work on strategic planning and implementation. That's incredibly hard right now for your director and assistant director to spend time on that. And that leads to just student by student, day by day, which is important, but you can't get to that work. The management of essential family, student, and staff processes. There are several key numbers there. Some 300 students. Currently, your director and assistant director chair over 200 of those meetings per year. And those are very intensive meetings if they're going to be done right. You know, many people involved in those. But you can just begin to think through, if you want to be strategic, forward-looking, working about multiple students, just that third bullet tells you a lot of where our time has gone. Staff supervision and coaching. We want to provide more oversight, more evaluation. We want to coach and support our teachers. We want them to succeed, but evaluation is part of that. Only administrators, certified administrators, can do that evaluation piece. This would spread that work also out across, not just put that burden on principals and assistant principals and others, but spread this out some. Communication. We're good, but we can be better. This last Thursday, Friday, we had some missteps. My fault with the coordinators in this district is informing about potential changes. But part of that is, you know, we're all moving too fast on too much big work. And lastly, we've added this just in the last day or so. Again, we've done very well with COVID-19, but particularly within the special ed community, there's increasing sense that the academic, emotional, and psychological impact of COVID-19 needs more attention. And families are calling out for more attention. Where do they go? They're going to tend to go to your director, your assistant director, or others. And so now, the other part of this is we have put here on 3 slides, and it's the gestalt here that matters, is these 3 slides. This is the work of effective management, leadership in special education. And how can 2 people do all this well? I'm going to do the gestalt, and you can go back and read it. But it's everything from chairing the various meetings, collaborative designing, engaging in follow-up, ensuring systems of progress, working with the new district data coordinator. By the way, that's going very well for us, that shift. Go to the next page. All of this work, some of it's specific. All of these things have to get done very well, right now largely by 2 people. And yes, other people involved in terms of spearheading it, keeping it going, managing it. And I'm not even at the 3rd slide yet. And here I am at the third slide. So this is, to me, these 3 slides, and I've lived this before in other districts, it's too much work for too few people. So that's where we're thinking it's really important to bring on the second assistant director. Now, how do we pay for this? Well, we're actually going to save money doing this. So we have an opportunity here. And if we didn't maybe have this budget advantage, we might wait until the strategic step I'm going to talk about in a second, the program review. But by returning the teacher inclusion facilitator to the classroom, we can do that because we know we've already had turnover within the SPED teacher line, so we have room there. We also, in discontinuing the SPED department chair, those involved in the district know this is the decision. They're aware of it. And just in the last 2 days have understood there's some $65,000 in grant money available so we can apply for this. So we view this as more than a 1-year deal, but this lets us get into the first year at actually a savings. So let me come now to the strategic site program review, which I talked about earlier. I will not reread this statement to you. This is an important statement of purpose and philosophy, though. Laura and Tessa have written this. I think it's a great statement on where we are, where we want to be. And again, this deck is designed to be something we can go back to. We can go back to in detail. But our view is let's get going with this program review, set a framework for it here. These are the guiding priorities. Those should be very clear. You're going to see some key things: continual improvement, strengthen program, inclusion, and maximize the continuum of services. And then we'd have this process. We'd establish a committee that's very representative. We shared this afternoon with the SPED staff and all the staff. We had an email already from a very key individual saying, hey, I like this, I want to get involved. So that's one person, but they could have gone the other way, right? But they were very quick to say, we hope you'll get busy here. Let me stress that Katzman, that's Urban Collaborative, and Inclusive Schooling are a piece of this, but they're not the only piece. This would be to let's go back to that, let's look at that, but let's also look at all the other knowledge and understanding we have in Hastings. But let's not lose sight of that good work. As I said to the SPED team mid-afternoon, I said it'd be natural for a superintendent to walk in, and I have complimented the board for saying, Bill, you better be serious about special education if you want to work in Hastings. And I said, I am. And it'd be natural then with that charge to walk in and say, let me get somebody in to help me study this. That'd be a silly thing right now in Hastings because you have these 2 reports and you have all this internal knowledge. So it's that marrying of let's look at what we already have before us, let's have our own people begin to study and review and bring forward, hopefully by January of 2023, bring to you as a board and a community, here's the plan moving forward to really try and be as effective as possible with special education. I'm quite sure, particularly with the Katzman recommendations and the inclusive schooling recommendations, that at least the one major piece here, the assistant director, that would be recommended here, the second one. So our feeling is since we can do that at no cost this year, we think we should build that into the process. So what we've brought you now in the midst of this budget is a pretty significant presentation on special education. We think it's forward-looking. We also think it's tied back to we have to provide high-quality services, but do that so we optimize our resources. An 11% increase in your budget is quite significant, and that is needed. We have to look long-term, though, at how do we have that growth be the right growth, the correct growth. And that, to me, ties back to as effective management as possible and a plan for the future direction. So now we've not a lot left. We'll move through it pretty quickly, but
And then we'll take questions at the end. So again, early in the presentation, I had mentioned this is just a shift of expense code. So you'll see here on the left in the adopted budget, these costs were embedded at the building level, and now they're broken out. So again, we're not proposing any change in our staffing for ELL teachers. It's just going to be moving forward represented as a separate budget code as required. And currently we have 3 ELL teachers, and we are proposing the same staffing for next upcoming school year. Pupil services, this is the guidance, the school counseling office. Again, no change, not a huge change there. There is an increase there in non-instructional salaries, really mostly driven on the amount of months that people are working in those slots, and the other increases are for the guidance counselors and their what we believe is the increase in those salaries next year. Health, again, is the school nurses, and this is, reflects, as we know, last year and the year before, we had quite an increase in these areas. We are proposing our pre-COVID staff model in those offices, and again, the increase there is driven mostly on contractual increases and some increases there for health services we paid out the districts, which that was brought up earlier, and that's some of the nursing costs we pay and to other districts where our students attend. And then psychologists, again, this is a standalone budget code, and the increase here is, again, just a contractual increase that we're showing. Co-curricular activities. As you may recall, a few years back, we did cut some monies here. We had restored it last year, and we are holding this. There's, other than just some contractual increases where nothing is being reduced. The one thing I want to highlight in this area of the budget, if you notice on the bottom half of the screen, there are some new lines there regarding hillside class trips and class trips at every building level. This, again, was a shift in how we need to report these expenses. Although there's an expense line item for these items that were previously captured in the school activity funds, we have a corresponding revenue. We are required by law to capture it here. So it is budget neutral from a sense that I now have a revenue offset on the revenue side of the budget, but it is required to show up in our general fund budget. So again, that's the majority of the increase there. If you took those out, there wouldn't be much of an increase. Again, in athletics, a couple lines is going down a bit with some of the Quad Village mergers. This is not a change in our participation, just rather a reduction in what we're currently paying to participate in those mergers. The increase here is being driven primarily by an increase in some coaches. Some years we just have, either we don't always run a JV team, but this year we had many students participate in interscholastic athletics, and the proposed budget next year just reflects some contractual increases as well as just actual participation levels. So again, that's the increase. And then as you can see on the bottom, the very bottom, if you can read that, the total instructional budget for next year is going up at that almost $9 million. So we can guess.
You didn't mean to say 9 million, did you?
No, it's 1.9 million.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I had 9 million.
No, it was our mistake.
Yeah,
Yes.
1.9 million.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to take you back a little bit because that's what I wanted to do before Bill got into this part, but it's fine, I'll add it all together. I'm just trying to, this is not my strength, so I may ask questions that may seem naive, and it's fine by me. No one is all knowledgeable, but I saw this before I walked in, and I gave Dr. Marquesi a heads up that I would ask certain questions, just that way he's aware. So the first is, I'm looking at the major drivers of expenses because the community have to vote on things, the budget and all of that. And sorry, I'm wearing this, I need this for the screen, so I'm sorry.
It makes you look cool, it's okay.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering, like, when I'm going through it, I'm just trying to figure out what is under the programs, what is under contracts, what is under pension, what is under health. So I know that it's all woven together, but this is, let me just, I wanted to be succinct, so I decided to type certain things out because I know I talk a lot. But I have seen over the years that sometimes when there's budget constraint, then we start cutting programs. And that bothers me a whole lot because I feel like we are here to give holistic education to our kids, right? And thank you, Dr. Marquesi. Like I always say, the litmus test for any education is how the special ed is doing. So I thank all of you for looking into this. But I feel like sometimes I'm very happy that we are going to do the portrait of graduate because then it would allow us to place that importance to the programs based on this alignment that we are doing, because I feel like sometimes if we are cutting programs, it feels, personally, this is really personal, it feels like, are we trying to have school without schooling our kids when we are taking the very programs that gives them the education? So that being said, I'm just trying to sort of figure out the programs that we have and what, like the amount of money that is directly connected to these programs. But I feel like everything is woven in there.
Yeah, everything is woven in there because programs are really speaking about the people who either facilitate those programs. So when we use that to kind of highlight what are some of the things that either drive a budget, like and if we talk about programs specifically, like if you were to, I don't know, like I don't want to pick out anything, but anything, like it could be music, if you were to like scale back that's a program, right? And running what we like or what we believe we should have here, there's a cost in doing so. I think a few years back, and I don't think it's helpful, I mean, it wouldn't be helpful to do it at this point, but we at one time created a budget if we said if we were only doing what was required, right, like class size, like we just sort of were like, we're not gonna do the extras. Like you can see that if you start pulling some of those out, much of those things, like programs, I'm just using music, things that maybe there'd be a certain level of music that's required, but that's an example of something that, off the top of my head, I want to say you would probably have a lot less people than needed if you didn't have as certain programs. So when we talk about programs, we speak about that broadly, like there's what we do and then the things on top of what we're required to do. They are all kind of embedded together, so I think we would have to really speak about specific things in order to kind of really separate those two. But really that is what drives school budgets. There's, you have your things that you have to do, and then things in addition to that, which are programs, that we do because we think it's the right thing for us to do.
And then my follow-up question, I went through the material thoroughly, just trying to understand certain things. As you all know, special education is very personal to me, but I had some questions that I feel like I'm going to shoot my own foot by these questions. But I was wondering, the way that I initially understood the role of the position was to increase the engagement. I know that there is a assignment that puts the teachers on assignment piece where I know that SEPTA were talking about it some time back, about how there will be, the idea was to provide the pedagogical and social emotional learning directly with teachers in order to support the students and to shift it more towards general education settings. So I was just wondering, like, that strategic pedagogical support in the classroom, I didn't seem to see it in terms of bringing all of this closer to general education setting for our students. I know there is the additional administrative work and some of the work that I see the chairs do, but I was just wondering, I did not see that kind of, like, the increased engagement in terms of pedagogy, social, emotional, inclusive learning to the broader non-special ed teachers, because we are having students in these different classrooms in order to sort of bring that kind of direct support in order to help. So that, I don't want to use the word training, but I know that when I had spoken to some special ed teachers, and I know that I'm not sure whether I should call it pushback, but it wasn't really happening the way that it should. So I was quite, as you know, I'm excited by that, thinking that it would give that broader connection, but I did not see any of that in there when I was going through it.
So let me answer 2 layers. I mean, Lauren, Tessa, you may want to answer. I can see Melissa wants to answer. So I'm going to frame it from social emotional, if I'm learning, and engagement and understanding social emotional. I'd put in there kind of psychological development.
Pedagogical was what I said.
Okay, right. So to me then, okay, we'll put it pedagogical. So then I think district-wide, for all we're doing, we have to value that, and that's important. So I heard you mention earlier the portrait of the Hastings graduate. So I think thinking about what we want students to know better to do in general, as we go through that process, I think we'll raise that up as a key. Then some of those questions are, what do we have to do to get there? What more do we have to do to get there? And that would be for all students. Within that, now I'm going to the second layer, if the sequence is clear, then it's thinking about for special education, is there specific types of things? The inner piece there, if I could do a layer between the layer, is the inclusion piece, right? So for all students, and then we have the special ed, but we want we want these to be inclusive environments. So then how are we organized managerially in terms of the guide and determine on the professional learning, the support tied to the planning to get there? I mean, that's a very broad answer, but I'm trying to tie it in a little bit. So that some of these you would see up there about collaboratively designed district-wide continuum of services. I mean, that would have to be embedded in there. You can go down the list here as some of the things you'd want your assistant directors doing. I don't know if you want to add a bit to it, or Melissa, you want to add?
I'm happy to. On the next slide, actually, the part 4 slide, let's see, is it, maybe I'm looking at the wrong one here. Yeah, part 3. Rationale part 3, responsibilities shared and distinct. There is a 4th bullet there that says identify needs for additional training and support and provide professional learning opportunities. Oh, it was, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so I wanted to speak to that, and just from an administrative lens, and actually a lot of the peer-reviewed research. So a big chunk of this, to your point, when we're looking at professional learning, it's not only working with, for example, an outside consultant, or it's not only, for example, engaging as a team in a collaborative inquiry, or it's not only, for example, investigating student work, but there's also job-embedded components that happen directly in the classroom. So I can give the example of the K-12 Mathematics Committee right now. We're starting to engage in a lesson study process, where there's going to be an opportunity to co-create and design lessons, and then that gets pushed into the classroom. It's very typical, and I'm thinking about even myself in an administrative role, having gone through, I'm hearkening back to participating in Metamorphosis, which is a coaching process, and that can actually be something that administrators are doing, and they're working together with teachers in the classroom. Or they may be a partner in a classroom and actually working with somebody to co-facilitate something. That is not uncommon. So all of these different things are, when we talk about professional learning, there's a lot of variety in terms of how professional learning can work, whether job embedded or outside of the actual classroom environment. In addition, an assistant director role also has the supervision evaluative shoulder, right? And so thinking about an observation cycle as an opportunity for professional learning as well. A pre-observation conference, participating in an observation, then a post-observation conference, having that grounded in student experience is also critically important. So when we're talking about encouraging strong practice and being close to the work, that doesn't preclude that person from being able to do that. That's all part of an administrator's, life, essentially. So there are different ways professional learning can manifest.
So I would ask another direct question following that. So is it the professional learning part, is skill development of non-special ed teachers, being that we are trying to create this whole, I'm being quite direct because again, I am close to someone in this program, a special ed. So my question is, my son is in there, but my question is skill development part of because I know that the teachers on assignment thing was aimed at doing that to support non-special ed teachers with skill development in order to allow the inclusivity. Right. So I'm just wondering if this line item is something, because for me my joy when I smiled about it was that, you know?
Yeah, well, I
Was-
can, I
yeah.
think Laura can speak.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch it, because I think that there's skill development across all areas. And I think one of the bullets, and I'm trying to flip through, is really with MTSS. So one of the things that we, and I'm sure that you guys can speak to as well, is part of the MTSS is providing interventions. And that's building the skill development to work with all children. So even children that are not neurodiverse, but maybe are struggling in an area, they go through an MTSS process. And having those, and that's part of going back to really both of the program reviews was talking about really linking general education and special education together collaboratively. So you don't have the general education and special education. And I think MTSS has been one of those great links for us, where we are participating in this collaboration with the building administration and going through all of our students, general education, special education, and talking about interventions. And the interventions, and I don't know if I'm answering your question the right way, but
No,
that's
you
where
are.
we see the skill development coming from on both sides. Because we're asking and we're brainstorming ways in which we can support all children across the board. And one of the beauties of that is there's a great deal of our students that in the past perhaps would have been classified as having a disability because they didn't go through MTSS, and now it's not necessarily that it was a disability or a difference, but it was just a different learning style. And through interventions, we're able to meet their needs and get them through that different learning style and understanding them differently, and then they're not going through the process of special education. So I don't know if that was kind of long-winded or something.
No, that I think I didn't know how to articulate it, so that was my concern about that kind of connections. And of course, Melissa, you did as well. One last question. I know that, again, this is dear to my heart, but it doesn't mean that I have to be fair and equitable across board. So my question I would have asked, if this was not dear to me, was the sustainability part. I need to be fair. I like fairness, but in terms of sustainability, in terms of funding, I'm hoping we can sustain it.
Right, well, I
But
think,
that has to be the reality at the end.
Sure.
And that's why I was asking about the program, right? I was trying to sort of, can we separate it so that but like I understand, it's all woven in, but so, I don't know.
sure. So I mean, in terms of, as we highlighted for next year's budget, we did have an existing position that, being that position will go back into the classroom from a budgetary standpoint, there was some money there already. And quite frankly, it's, even without the federal grant, it wouldn't be much additional to what the position paid, because the teacher's salary versus what the administrator's salaries is not significantly different. So I think we've already had that salary embedded in our budget. We do have this additional benefit of having some grant money to help offset that. So for this upcoming year, it's actually a decrease, but I think in terms of the majority of the money had been in the budget already. So I would say that from that standpoint, it's not a new dollar amount, it's just using the dollars a bit differently. So I think we do see that as, and that was part of the thinking of why we would even propose it. Even without the federal grant money, we were already looking at this model because of the fact that there was dollars available there. And then I don't want, but I think the other idea is sometimes when you do have, there is sometimes a reason to invest, because there could be, not that it is about money, but there are other benefits financially that can help. Like when you don't have enough people to do work, there's also like a cost in that too. So I'm saying long-term, I'm not saying currently, but I think that piece alone is important to have that additional oversight. I think, as Laura had said, when there's not enough oversight, people may be classified that don't need to be. So I think just, there's an investment there, but I think in terms of the budget, from a budget standpoint, I believe the money's already there, and I believe it'll be able to be sustained. you know, for the, at least the near future.
Yeah, and when you're in special education discussions, talking about dollars is a very delicate issue. The decisions for each individual have to be tied to what that individual needs. Writ large, you need to look at this budget. Writ large, you have to look at 11% growth. Writ large, you have to say, if that's the correct 11%, we got to honor, embrace it, and keep it going. If it's not quite the right number, there's a big sustainability problem. And communities away from here, some I know well, have gotten into some really not good moments when they say, how do we pick the number in growth in special education, and then go to your program question earlier, and then you say, to afford this, we have to cut over there. And I've watched communities tear themselves apart. So I'm going slowly to be really clear here, that at that moment of the individual decision within special ed, you provide the services required, you don't get into a dollar discussion. You hear, though, writ large, as it adds up, you say, are we managing effectively? Again,
Correct.
here, too much work for too few people. I'm not talking about the quality of people here. I'm talking about the extent of work on those 3 slides. And then how do you keep up with that so you really are confident that by and large, that growth there is correct. And you don't want to ever set a metric to get that growth number to a lower level. I've lived that. That is unfair because, again, I opened up saying this is about individuals. This isn't about a decision around 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 students. It's about each one adding up. But I hope I'm being clear there, because there is a sustainability concern, and in part I'll put it non-numeric. Can we be sustainable as a healthy community talking with each other about education? And if we don't find a good way to talk about what the growth is and the right growth, we get to an unsustainable place. Is that a helpful?
It's very helpful, and that's why.
And I'm trying to do it in a very respectful way.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying that I just hope that, I mean, again, conversations have happened with individuals that are parents of special ed, myself included, and that teacher skill development to support, not including non-special ed, and not just the professional learning piece, has been our conversations. I mean, I'm saying this publicly and they can hear me. And so I'm part of that community. And I'm just saying it on record that the skill development of the teachers to support our students directly is really dear to our hearts. Because then when we know that that the not just the special ed educators, but the non-special ed educators that are also having some of our kids in their classroom, if they get this direct support, then we don't have to look elsewhere to be sending our kids. So I love this. Are you kidding me? I'm not trying to shoot my own foot. What I'm trying to say is that I'm hoping that the job description is what it was, right? Which was what I was thinking, that professional learning piece can be delineated so that our parents that have kids in special ed will know that the professional learning is not just the professional learning we think. So that's all I'm saying. But like what the MTSs that Laura had explained, that's all I'm trying to articulate. Yeah.
Additional questions?
Staying on special ed for 1 second, and maybe if you don't have to answer it tonight. If you want to think about it, it's fine. Looking at the 3 pages of the shared and distinct responsibilities, I'm curious what of those responsibilities is like we just have 2 people doing all of those things now, and so if we hire somebody else, we free up their time so they can do something else and do more. And I'd be curious what those more things are. Or is it that some of these things, another reason we need some is some of these things are kind of slipping through the cracks and we can't keep up with everything that is required to do?
Yeah, we can, I think, come back to you with more of an answer. Do you want to speak to it some right now?
And I think part of it is a little bit of both. You know, I mean, we can, if I had time, I could go through each one, each one of them. But I do think what you pointed out was a little bit of both, the data is a big piece that we really need to spend more time on. And having Tess and I run over 200 CSE meetings is just not.
Yeah, I get that, seeing this list. And so what I'd love to know when we promote this to the community is that if we had somebody else, here's all the extra stuff they could do. Because some of this embedded in these are the responsibilities that you guys have. So I'd like to see, like, if this is off of your plates, like, here's what more we can do and what more we can focus on, because that, I think, is a great way to rationalize hiring someone else, because we have everything they're doing now plus.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Or it could just simply be that you guys are dying and you just need somebody else to help you with the day-to-day work, which is totally understandable as well.
right,
So
and
I'm
I
not saying
think-
it's not.
And it applies across all of your administrators.
Right.
Because you've heard, because any of the administrators here, and they need to worry at some level about, and we purposely put these 3 lists in here, and again, I'll keep, if I'm pronouncing Gestalt right, that's the idea. It's,
Yeah.
What do those 3 together tell you? But it really is to toggle from that, because you want these 6 bullets, if I'm adding up, you want, 5, not counting the placement, Farragut or Hillside, but you gotta do those 5 really, really well. And then if you just say, okay, if I'm gonna do those 5 really, really well with 2 people on point, yes, the other administrators, some in this room support, but if I'm gonna do those 5 really, really well, and then, yes, some of that's on these next 3 pages, but some of this is really specific stuff.
Yeah.
And if you just think about that meeting obligation, because if you don't do the meetings right, well, if you don't get the relationships right, and you don't do the data and the details, and you get in those meetings and those aren't right, that then leads us to places we don't wanna be in. We're in conflict with families, we're in conflict with students, and either they hang in with us or off they go.
Right.
And that is true for districts all over. That's
Yeah,
not just a
totally
Hastings
makes sense.
story.
So yeah,
that's-
it'd just be interesting to see like
Yeah,
what
so I
the
think we
plus
can
up
come
might
back
be.
with that more.
Great,
So,
thank
sure.
you.
So I would probably try taking it in a different, tact for us. And I like the way Bill and Maureen said it, if we're increasing special ed by $1 million, doesn't mean we have to sell that to the community or we have to defend that. None of us on the board have the expertise of being a principal or an administration, possibly. I'm misspeaking on that one. But I mean, if the administration comes to us and says this area needs to increase, we don't have the ability to push back on that. We don't have, we're not going to defend, line by line, if it's our moral obligation. It's part of educating all your students, so that's just what it is, and we don't need to focus in those 3 areas. I think our 3 main drivers, we're spending $1 million more on bond payments, we're spending $1 million more on special ed, and we're spending $1 million more on instructional salaries, natural growth. The bond was passed by the community, the special ed is supported by administration, and salaries are contractually going to go up as we have step increases and inflation needs, and we renegotiate new contracts. My concern would be what I think you touched on. Is this sort of growth sustainable? I think the answer is, of course, every year there's a vote to decide on that. So 10% increases might be sustainable if the community wanted to pay for it. We're not a business. We have no revenue item. We just tax our residents. So I'm of the impression that 6% growth is a concern. And I wouldn't want to focus on any of those 3 areas because the bond passed and special ed is a moral obligation to educate all students. And salaries go up every year. That's what they do. But I don't think, I think we're running into a trap here. It's a 6% growth or 6.5% growth, and it's going to fall 4% on the taxpayer. It would have been more if the state didn't come in and throw us $500,000 more. It would have been more if the reserves weren't used for special ed settlements, and it would have been more on the taxpayer if we didn't appropriate $1.8 million from our reserves and our balances. So I see 4% on the taxpayer this year, and probably that would continue as we use our reserves. I don't think 6% is what our community is expecting, and I think we need to look at other areas, because that is a number that I don't think is going to get the large percentage of support. So I trust all of your expertise. Not looking to cut it from any of these details, but I think we have a challenge ahead of us as a board to decide if not to go digging for 60 grand here or 10 grand more for coaching. Is there a direction that we can put towards administrators to say the other areas? I've spoken about them before. Class sizes, whether it's attrition, is an easy area for the community to understand. Do you want to continue paying for 20 kids per class in some classes? I think some of those averages may be misrepresented. I think I've heard Lou or Jennifer say, they have classes at 28. So if the average comes if you look at a subject area of math, we probably should be focusing on the top 5 highest class sizes instead of looking at averages. But there's concerns in this budget, and it's not concerns about what you guys have found and accurately said need to be addressed. So I'm excited that our community has strong leaders, and that we are going to grow our bond pass. Seems like long-term thinking. Special ed is increasing. Seems like the correct focus on inclusion in all our students. But I don't think our community's ready for 6% growth, even if it's 4% on the taxpayer this year, 5% next year. So I think there are conversations that need to be had, but not based on line items here.
So what are you saying, Jeremy, that you're asking like Maureen and Dr. McCursey to go back? And
No, I'm
look
not.
at
No, not
where
these
they can-
items.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't believe I have that ability to ask administrators to go back. I think if 5 board members, were concerned about a number, we would have to talk about trade-offs. It's not a trade-off, as Bill said. We're not picking individuals. We're not picking individual departments. But if the board is comfortable with these numbers, and I'd like that it comes in March, but it's rushed. It's always late at the end. The second half of our year is always tighter. If 5 board members are comfortable with this number, then they're going to hear it, and they're going to know to keep going on. If
But I feel
5
like
board members are not, I would, we'll find out from the community whether it passes at 50.1 or 55. We haven't voted down a budget in 40 years.
But I can't make that decision right now because, like, one of the things you said was to look at class sizes. I would need them to go back and say, if we made class sizes 30 average, then here's
save
what the
this.
savings would be. Like, I can't make a decision without knowing what the facts
Yeah,
are.
I think maybe, Doug or Allison could speak to it, but,
There would be a lot of savings. If you make class sizes.
no, not that.
No, I know that. I made
No,
that
I wasn't
up.
gonna say, there,
Right.
if you guys could
Community, I
speak-
don't want it to
A
be
lot of
30, I'm just
savings.
saying.
No, if you guys could speak to the
Yeah.
role of a trustee, because, whereas I might be interested in having, Maureen run hypotheticals, what if, through attrition we ran this, that's not, her role's not to answer to me, and my role is
collective
not,
board,
Yeah.
to tell Bill what to do. I am a singular person until it gets to be 5
Collective,
asking the
yeah.
question. I mean, that's not, they don't take focus from a 7-headed dragon. We either are strongly thinking, let's see how the community takes it.
And that's why I mean, when I did my homework, trying to wrap my head around it and looking at the numbers and all of that, I just don't want programs to be cut only because because these.
I did the same thing. I'm like, I
Yeah.
just don't know where it could go. That's why maybe you guys
So-
can advise, because
exactly,
I look at it
because-
and I'm like, it's so tight. I don't know where we could take from.
And it's like, again, I said that when we cut programs, it's like taking schooling away from schools. That's the reason why all of us are here. And so Dr. Mackenzie rightly said it. You can't put money to the value of education when that's why we are all here. And so it becomes a very difficult thing. And that's why it's just, again, this is not my area of expertise. So I'm just being naive, trying to say, okay, which money belongs to this? Which money, and it's like Maureen rightly said, it's all woven that, I mean, it's very hard to really delineate what needs to be done. But I'm just hoping that whatever it is, we should not cut programs. That's all I'm saying, because it's necessary for our students' education.
And one thing that's really clear to me when I look at this 5-year projected enrollment is that it's fairly flat. You know, it's not really increasing that much. I mean, the town is the size it is, which just makes me think that when we look at our village trustees, if we're really thinking about having more housing someplace, any place, whatever that is, I mean, that's not for us to decide, but I hope that the community realizes, I want a really good look at what the tax implications of that are, to make sure that they're bringing in enough money to cover any new kids that come in, because we're
Correct.
so thin right now. It's
Well, we're-
so important.
We have to see if we have the size in the building. We need the size in the building. We don't have the size.
Like, I mean, I want if that were to happen, I want as accurate as possible, how we are gonna pay for that, because it's.
And that's a little farther down the road
It is
than
further
I'm
down the
looking
road, but
at.
it's
You know, if
something
we're looking
to-
at 5 years down the road, I'm also asking, you know, like, is there a, you know, sustainability issue here, you know, over 3 years, you know, without the unknowns?
Can I just ask a quick question? So to Doreen's point, the 5-year projection, which is pretty flat, that doesn't include, you know, the sort of the conversationally slated development that's already sort of,
No.
okay. And that's several hundred units that we're talking about.
Right.
And to be clear, just because it's germane to this discussion, when we're talking about the development which is planned, it's largely a condominium-based development. And it is correct to say that, by and large, the tax base or the tax contribution from that kind of development is less, markedly less,
Yes.
than what exists here already. So just on the sustainability front, again, it's not necessarily Board of Education purview, but it's a complex picture that's might get more complex, and to the extent that parents or residents are paying attention to what goes on here, it sort of behooves them to pay attention to what goes on in the entire village, because it's one thing. Would that be
Yep.
sort of accurate?
Right, it's 4% this year. If we have more kids that we can't pay for, it's, 8% some year. I mean,
But if I can say one other thing, just to Jeremy's point, you know, we look at numbers like dollars or number of kids in a class. I feel like, you know, the way a lot of parents derive value, their sense of value is it is the sense of value, right? It's not the number necessarily. And I think Dr. McCarthy made a really good point about that, you know, how critical that onboarding is in special education. That if in that first meeting, if the parents don't trust that, it's a trust issue, right? If the parents don't trust that this is going to be the right fit, it already sets things on a different path, you know, potentially more complex, more expensive path. So that idea that sort of, you know, quality pays, it doesn't cost in a way, and finding the highest quality structure is the highest value structure, and whatever numbers come along with that, that's sort of what our obligation is to do, and sort of the best outcome. So just to mention.
One thing, one thing we could do, and we have to figure out how to structure it, is, I think, come up, budgets are values, is what a budget is. Budget is just, it's a financial explication of what people value. If you don't value small class sizes, you can get to a smaller budget.
Right.
If you don't value certain programs, you can get to a smaller budget. I mean, it's really just an explication of values. And so one thing, that we could ask Bill and Maureen to do is, if you were to bring it down by 1 percentage point, whatever, what are some scenarios that could do that? And we could discuss those as a board, because with 632 lines in a budget, it's very hard for us to sit here and debate. So what happens? There's a big number, and you look at the big number and you go, it'll probably hurt less to cut from a big number than a small number. So let's just go after that. And that's kind of how the budget conversations have historically gone, right? And what's one of the biggest numbers? Special ed. And so everyone says, well, there's got to be some fat in the special ed budget, so maybe we can cut it. Well, that's, as we've talked about tonight, not necessarily the case, right? Because as Bill pointed out, Maureen's numbers showed, special ed is not about, it's if individuals drive special ed. There's a moral obligation. I think everyone on this board agrees to that. So that's one thing we could do. If we were to, what are some of those? And we've done that in the past, where we've looked at what could a percent, like what would that look like? And then we would be having at this table in public a values-based conversation as opposed to a financial-based conversation. And then we may come back and say 6.6% is the right number. We've had those conversations. Or we may say, no, it isn't. I think it also gives the public a more kind of accessible way to think and talk about the budget and look at real options, as opposed to just saying, I want it lower.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay, great, you want it lower. What would you suggest we do to get it lower? Because here are 3 or 4 very practical ways. I think, Jeremy has laid out a few, there's likely others. And let's all not be naive about the fact to some constituency here. That's the hard part about this budgeting process. So, we can chat maybe a little bit after the meeting to talk about kind of what that looks like and how to frame that as a set of options to come back to the next board meeting. Jeremy, you look like you might have had an additional thought you want to share.
Well, before any other, comments go, is it possible to invite our team to join us back at the table? Because I don't know if you guys are still presenting, if you want your chairs, at all, instead of the powerful Letterman pose that you have going on us right now. But because I know we haven't heard from everybody, and you have beautiful chairs
And
nearby.
I bet if I sit down, that means some people.
Then I might stand up.
Some people here will get to leave and go home. Is that what?
No, I didn't know what the implications, but I'd love to.
I do want to respond to Doug's idea. Can I do it sitting down?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I did like and thank you for the whole
Yeah,
presentation.
thank you both.
Thank you. Because I like the horseshoe discussion a little bit better.
This is the first time I get to look at Bill and talk.
Well, it's-
Enjoying it.
Okay, but it's also, it's without the,
No, I just wiped out.
A new budget item, you have to include that.
No, what Doug, what you're suggesting, I think makes sense. I just think we all have to understand that whatever's on the list will not be popular, and we can't say it's the board's list. We can't say it's the superintendent's list. I own anything and mistakes in the last several days. Everyone up there knows I owned a few errors directly and clearly, but I've lived that list in other places, and it quickly becomes, how dare they? As opposed to, we're just trying to understand, as you said, and if we can agree that we're just trying to understand, and we keep messaging that, then I'm all for that if it gives some clarity. The politics around it can get quite severe and get quite individualized.
Yep.
And so I think we just have to, it's the right exercise, but if we go into it
It has
as
to
a
be
team,
framed. It has to be framed
as a
well.
team, saying, we need this, we're just trying to understand, then if it helps you and ultimately helps the community get to yes on this, then.
Yeah, and it depends what the community really wants on this, because, 4% is one thing, it's a high number, but 4% this year with inflation seems much higher, because everybody's money is going, not as far as it used to, so maybe they're spending more on groceries, or just, food, or whatever, clothing, whatever it might be, so 4% could really hit some people hard.
You have to remember that inflation's hitting us, fuel costs.
Yeah, totally,
electricity, so it's hitting the
right, I
cost
see where it's
side,
hitting the
too.
budget, too.
I was just going to make, 2 suggestions. So one of the ways we could do this, if you want to come back to the whole board, we were initially I had planned to have a finance committee this evening, but we intentionally moved it with the thought that allow the like the entire board, and then in particular the finance committee, to kind of see the full budget proposal, and then we could possibly come back, and then to what you're asking, maybe run some of those scenarios at the finance committee, and then bring it to the full board from that, so that, to Bill's point, it's exactly the same what you're asking, it's just a little bit different in the method of how we get there. I do just want to mention with the class size, and we'll, of course, run that scenario, we did really look at it, this year, but I think in light of like COVID, I think we were purposeful on keeping our class sizes where they have been the last few years, so that was somewhat intentional, at least for this upcoming budget. More, even though we had a larger budget increase, we did struggle, but to Jeremy's point, we felt it was best to kind of leave, to use some of the reserves and not necessarily touch that at Hillside, I'm just using Hillside as an example, where there may have been some slightly kind of cuspy class sizes there.
Can I jump in for just a sec? Do you
Please.
want to let
Before-
the
yeah,
administrators go
yeah.
first?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I think you were signaling Bill too.
Yeah, I know, I
that
want to
they
let
could-
them go home. I want to
Yeah.
thank them, because everything here, while Maureen and I talked and Melissa talked, I mean, this is really a team effort. And again, I mean this, it's cliche, but I mean it. I'll own the mistakes, they get the wins, because there's so many wins. But thank you. Go home, because you have to get up early. I don't.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I do think it would be helpful, when you talked about attrition, to see, if those areas could bring costs down as we go. How would that affect some of those class sizes? Are those areas that seem reasonable? That's just something to investigate that would be less painful in terms of employees. Nobody would be losing a position, it's just attrition.
Yeah,
But-
right, I mean, I think in anything we would do, the ones that were through attrition, we've already recognized in the budget, but anything in addition to
In
that right now
addition.
would be reductions in staff.
I sort of mean in a couple years ahead.
Oh, yeah,
In a couple years
absolutely,
ahead,
yep,
yeah.
sorry.
And as Bill said, a lot of it is counterproductive, like, if you're focused on the needs of all your students and your special needs or your higher needs, and then you start throwing in, I think the board should always be the scapegoat, but a board-directed, what would it mean like if we looked at higher class sizes? Well, one of the trade-offs of savings through attrition or class sizes is, some of your higher needs students don't get the benefit of small classes, which is, as we were saying, not everybody is classified as special ed because of our different remediation steps we get to it. So nothing is clean cut. The low-hanging fruit is 5 digits, not 6 digits, and not worth the board's attempt to go swatting piñatas. And, I think, I'd be concerned, not, I don't know if I stated, I don't know where our role is, approving budgets from our administrators to go out and get a vote. But, Damaris spoke a lot about it, before she joined the board. A community that passes budgets 51-49 has some sort of obligations to the 49 that are saying no.
All right.
And at the same point, I think Maureen and, you both said, I'm not sure what our direction is, or Doug once said it, who are we to decide what should be voted on, or maybe we are, but 51-49 budget votes are not typical in our community, so I'm not being accurate or relevant there, so I should stop talking.
I wanted to say something that I think I had spoken to one of our board colleagues, and this is actually about the contract, and which of course is not a detailed stuff at all. But this is just a thought process that I had, that sometimes I feel like the difficulty with, like when we are talking about all this, we talk about class size and all those things, increases for this and that. Sometimes I think there is this kind of reality where this is a very small district. And obviously, it can lead to, being that it's a small district, it can lead to friendships and closeness. That is healthy. But I was thinking, this was just something that I had thought about for a while now in looking at all this budget stuff when I'm going through it. And again, I'm looking at the major expenditure drives that was on the slide. And this is just my thought. It may not mean anything, but I wanted to suggest that maybe, I know that there is 3 legal ways of contract negotiations that we can adopt. And if I just pictured myself looking at my own kids' teachers and having to negotiate their salary. I don't think I can say no to anything. And I sat today, I was doing that. I'm like, we are so close. Like, it's such a difficult thing. And I was just thinking that the 3 things that we have, like what we were told in terms of contract negotiation, was that there was the current choice we are using, which is lawyers and superintendent and the union. But then there's also the one that is lawyers, union, outside negotiator, where you don't need to have a superintendent, you don't need to have a board rep. Of course, there's the one that you can have a board rep. So I was just thinking that if that burden gets taken away after the portrait of the graduate, I'm thinking that it can allow that, well, there's nothing like objectivity, but it can allow that, like, I'm just wondering, how can you manage a difficult practical, make a difficult practical judgment call on such issues that may be leading to people's pockets when there is that kind of connectivity. And I'm not sure whether, if maybe the district tries to employ a different negotiation process, it may relieve that burden. I'm not sure. I mean, this is something that I was just thinking about. I was just creating scenarios. Again, this is not my area of expertise, so I may be saying this in a very layman's way of talking, but I was just thinking, how would you feel? There's no way I can say no to any of my kids' teachers if they want 100% increase. I'm like, go for it.
Well,
You are so amazing.
I'm sorry, I mean,
So that's all I just wanted to say.
that particular, I mean, I don't think that really has a place in our current, budget.
Okay.
From a
That's-
standpoint that,
It's not
yeah.
part
So
of
we
it?
still have to vote on it, so you are having
Yeah.
a voice no matter whether you're
Right.
having a direct voice or
But
not.
in general,
You have to
Oh,
you
I'm
know,
just saying
what
in general.
Damaris was, a small community, a healthy small community,
Correct.
whether, right, but we're not gonna continue that into any details, because it's
No,
not.
I'm not.
But
I know
if you're
it's not
saying,
this.
you're realizing the difficulties of,
The board
you know,
ultimately has to
choices and
vote on
trade-offs.
those contracts and.
Yeah, I was
and that,
talking about trade-offs.
but we
yeah.
don't talk about
But that's
them,
also like, an
early.
expense to the
I
district.
just want to
so.
make sure that everyone has an opportunity to say
Convertible.
something in the budget. And Sylvia, you may or may not have anything to add.
No, I mean, the only thing that I was going to say is, I'm a veteran of all of 2 budgets, and I've only known like austerity budgeting, so usually it's been set up in such a way that there's pluses and minuses, what we need to add, what we can take away. So I really appreciate the construct that you set up, Doug, in terms of kind of like a follow-up to see what, because these all seem like additions in terms of what we see, not to say that they're not compelling and not necessary, but I certainly would like to see what an offset would look like, to see what is actually, how close we can get to being manageable and hopefully closer to in a sustainable way, but I don't mean to be redundant. That was just my only,
Well, I'll
in a
chat-
nutshell, that's it.
I'll chat with Bill and Maureen to just figure out how we can do that. Bill's raised some of the concerns, definitely understand those. The last thing we want to do is open up 14 bear traps that we can all just walk through together in a
Right,
board
right.
meeting, which is, I've been there. And so there's got to be a way to do that in a productive way. So I'm going to just keep moving here. I think this has been a great
Yeah.
session, so thank you. These guys let you take off unless you want to hang out.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Hi, guys.
it was good reporting.
Don't get wet.
I know, it's
May have to
Boring
hang out
out
here
now.
for another 10 minutes or so.
Right. Bye, guys.
He's left in just in time.
I
But
think we have public comment
to
coming
the-
up, right?
Bill and Maureen, thank you for putting this together. And,
Yes, thank you.
we've got public comment. I know we're a little bit later, obviously, than normal. And you? Okay, please, thank you.
Definitely first.
Only. My name is Toby Linder. I'm the mother of Charlie, a senior, and Owen, a sophomore at the high school, and I live in Hastings at 13 Mariana Drive. I'm here today to talk about the calendar.
Yes.
I do not have strong feelings about when you start. I want to start off by saying that I know there are considerations for this calendar that I can't begin to understand, be it the collective bargaining agreement, lots of things. So I trust you to make the right decision. But I still have 3 points I want to make. First, as many of you may know, there's been some discussion on Facebook about the calendar, some of which focus on the Jewish holidays. One poster suggested, since she'd already booked her vacation, we should skip the Jewish holidays. I couldn't let that comment go without coming here to say that I found that deeply offensive, and to suggest that I skip the holiest day of my year so someone can go away for Labor Day was really offensive. So I'm here today to reiterate for those of us who do observe, and it's an observation, not a celebration, that we can't just skip the holidays. Second, I wanted to discuss the second day of Rosh Hashanah. I don't know if that's under consideration being cut, but it's been discussed before. My first hope, of course, would be that it's not cut. It's often mentioned that we try to be consistent with our Rivertown's peers. I looked at a bunch of their calendars, none of them are cutting the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Sorry to point you out, Jeremy, but last year at a discussion you said, I don't know anybody who observes the second day of Rosh Hashanah in a board meeting. I'm here to say we exist. And I wrote to Dr. McCursky about this, and I sent an email last year about this. With absolute certainty, there are families that observe the second day. We're not the largest group, but we exist. The calendar is a way to show that we are inclusive and aim to be more inclusive. I do not believe that removing the second day of Rosh Hashanah would send the right message. That being said, I totally understand that times are changing, and you may feel you have to make this change. We need to balance equity with observing the holidays of all faiths and cultures. I just ask that should this change be made, it not become precedent. As a recovering lawyer, I know the value of precedent, and I just don't want it to become de facto. Oh, we cut it 1 year, we're always cutting the second day. As this year would have happened in theory if we cut the second day, we could have started school on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, which would have been awful. Thank goodness we didn't have to. But I just want to make sure that if there's a discussion about this, we realize that it's not going to be a hard fact that we always have school on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Additionally, I'd ask that it be made clear that no exams would be given on any holidays. I reiterated to everyone. Third, on Facebook, it was mentioned that Dr. McCursky will be meeting with local clergy later this month. I'm not sure who's included in that group, but I just wanted to suggest that this meeting not be limited to clergy from Hastings. While Temple Beth Shalom and Mishkan Ha'am are lovely congregations, they do not represent all of the Jewish voices in our town. So I'd suggest including rabbis from Greenberg Hebrew Center and Chabad in Dobbs. I hate public speaking. The last time I was here, Mrs. Sullivan was principal at Hillside. I was in the building leadership team, and I spoke about homework. It was that was hard then. It's hard now, but this is really, really important. And I just wanted to be here to stand up, just make sure that my voice and the voice of my fellow observant Jews is heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did a good job.
Did a great job, yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to the conversation about the 2022-2023 calendar attached for the public as well as board members. You'll see not only a draft of the calendar, but I think a very helpful set of considerations that the committee that put the calendar together had. And so we'll open up that conversation. I don't know, Dr. McCursky, if you've got some opening comments you want to make about it, or we want to open it up to the board. But I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I'll just say a few things, and Melissa, I don't know if the addendum note, if that got posted with the agenda, if we should probably do that, the memo I sent to the board. So, let me say the first thing is, points of view and differences about the calendar are actually healthy and normal. So, the amount of discussion on it, I think is what I anticipated. And that's why, like most districts, you have two bites at this apple. And there was a thorough process by a good committee that worked very hard and efficiently, and I'm told maybe more efficiently than in the past. We had very good structure. And that's why, I don't know if you always get this 4 sets of documents, but we wanted to show you the work. And so it.
First time I've seen it.
Okay, so and in part, we anticipated a few hot topics. So if you even look closely in the notes, you saw next to the Labor Day discussion, hot topic, because we knew this was a tricky one. So we did send to the board earlier today, and it should be in the public record, other options regarding could you get to post-Labor Day or not. And I can cut to the chase if you want. You tell me as a board if that's helpful. Sure. I think 1 day back, you need 2 days back, and the Easter Monday, that you could get there pretty quickly. Getting to the second day gets trickier. And so there are a set of options here, not in any preference order, and none of them are ideal as it relates to finding that second day. And then let me just clarify a couple things. We are a 182-day school day, instructional day district. Dobbs Ferry is as well, Irvington and the other great one are not at 180 days. Dobbs Ferry solves this problem by doing 3 instead of 4 superintendent conference days. So I don't think you want to get in a discussion of shortening your instructional days. I'm not sure you want to get in a discussion about shortening your superintendent conference days, but it may be that's where you're going to land. Not to decide tonight, I hope, but it may be at least say to the administrators, is there any solution around the superintendent's conference days? Because other solutions we looked at and did not go there. Rosh Hashanah, the 2 days, we see that all the quads are at 2 days, and we felt we should honor that observance. The other places we looked, paying attention to the emails this weekend were very helpful from the board. That January 2nd, that's the federal observance of New Year's Day. So that's why you see almost no districts in that day, and I think those that are, I'm afraid it may be a typo unless they're going to be in on a federal holiday. So really what you're left with is, for the first day I think is fairly easy, and I say that as someone who cares about Easter Monday in my household.
Yes, I do.
So just, that I think is consistent and easy not to have that. Then finding that second day is tricky. So maybe we discuss and respond. I know Melissa's ready to talk about the pros and, Melissa S. is prepared to talk about the pros and cons of the superintendent's conference days. I even put down their February break days, maybe that's something.
Better.
So let me stop. This is really a board decision. We respect that. Last thing I say, after tonight, I will go back to the committee, because it's a very good committee. It is representative of all of your bargaining units. And I think they want to know where you are, and then if you may have a charge for them and try and figure some things out. So I hope my framing right now was helpful.
Can I ask you just a clarifying
Please.
question before everyone, Melissa, you can help with this. So one option is reducing the superintendent conference. Another option is actually moving one till a third one to that front end, right? Which I get is not ideal. You would rather have them spread out. But can you talk a little bit about if we were to have that third one at the front end, how you might be able to use that?
Sure, we can use it the same way that we would be able to use it in March. The question is really around faculty readiness at the beginning of the year when you're anticipating starting school. So people are thinking about, their minds are typically on setting up their classroom, getting their program ready for receiving students, and so, professional learning is really valuable, and I feel like whenever we do have a day, I work with the professional learning committee to design that. So another another challenge is we need to front load that planning now to be able to make sure that we're prepared for the start of the school year. That is doable, we can do it. It's just, it gives us a little bit more lead time when there is a March Superintendent's Conference Day. But circling back, so regardless, those days are filled. Like, there's never not an opportunity. So if teams need to do some collaborative planning, if we need to engage in some work with a consultant, for example, it actually gives us the opportunity to not pull people out of the classroom and not have to provide sub-coverage and not have to get into that. So those days are really incredibly valuable. The other thing too is that they do, in terms of instructional minutes, there is an allowance to count those instructional minutes. So when we're thinking about days that we're obligated to and instructional minutes in terms of the state's expectation, it helps us, in thinking about making sure we meet our requirements. So it is, in my opinion, it's really critical to preserve them, because not only is it symbolically sending a message that we value professional learning, we're creating space for teams to work together and do that, also from, just a compliance standpoint over minutes, and then thinking about, how we can budgetarily be beneficial to not have to pull people out of the classroom, provide sub-coverage to do the professional learning. It does provide a day to be able to do that. So while front-loading it to the beginning of the school year is not ideal, it is certainly doable.
Can you explain for members of the public who may not be familiar with like the substance of the superintendent's days, like what previously has populated them? Because people might be, who aren't familiar or don't pay such close attention to what you do on those days, might not know why is it that we have a whole 4 days or a whole 3 days allocated. Because basically I think some people will inquire, like, should just be easy to give one up. But if you
Right.
don't know what's actually happening, just like kind of a nutshell
Sure.
version.
I can actually give a very specific, we have a schedule coming up next week, and so I can literally read that through. So, so on March 16th, for example, after a brief welcome by Dr. McCursey, myself, and Dr. Janice Mateo Toledo, on behalf of the Professional Learning Committee who designed this day, we will be having a keynote around persisting through difficult times. The leadership, it's around basically leadership around diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. It's connected to one of our professional learning goals that's outlined in the 3-year plan. That one happened to be funded by HEF. Then there's a choice-based session. So one is also offered by HEF and the other by the PTSA, the social neuroscience of race and ethnicity. And then the other is a You Can't Be What You Can't See, how media shapes our understanding of gender, what we need to do to be envisioning a more inclusive world. And then the connection to that learning will then be a team collaborative planning and reflection, taking some of those pieces either from the social neuroscience of race and ethnicity or the gender work that's happening, some cross-pollination at the team level in terms of what has been learned, and then applying it to practice so that they have time to meet, incorporate and process what they've learned about, and then think about how it directly applies to their work as educators. After having a lunch break, then they are working, the teaching faculty has work dedicated to collaborative instructional planning. So for example, big ideas, professional learning. At the middle school mathematics, the work that's been happening, that's dedicated time to be able to continue those efforts. We also provide professional learning for all bargaining units, so the TAs, the aides, the monitors, the clerical, the custodial faculty. We'll be engaging in a workshop with Dr. Janice Mateo Toledo and Kristen Kumar around universal design for learning. Reaching all students essentially, and thinking about, as professionals in our roles, how we can make sure that we're creating inclusive environments, inclusive mindset, and then culturally responsive pedagogies, dipping into the framework, and then again thinking about in each person's role, how can they contribute to making sure that that environment is ideal for students. So that's our upcoming one. So it's both theoretical, but then also practical and planning designed, and then opportunities for teams to work together, which I have heard directly from teachers that they want more of. They really loved having the late start Fridays, but again, with the instructional minutes piece, that became very difficult. So this is an opportunity for those instructional minutes and that collaborative planning. So
Yeah,
I hope that's helpful.
And Sylvia, I think this sort of asking it for the public that may not know, as a brand-new superintendent in New York State, this is really a misnomer. It's mislabeled, because it sounds like, oh, it's the superintendent wanting this, doing
Right,
this, and
exactly.
ordering it. And
That's what
at
I'm
least-
getting at. It's
At least
not-
here in Hastings, it's not at all.
Yeah.
Right.
It is very much in a district that has powerful autonomy. I'm trying to say, let's get to coordinated autonomy. This really is bubbling up. It is a bit in your HTA contract in terms of who has say, but this is very much what the staff and the teachers own. And even last week in our we have regular meetings with bargaining unit leads. The CSEA was saying, you know, what are we, and they have something planned, and they said, thank you. So it's not easy to pull it back or shift it, because it is a key place. The last thing I'll say is that school systems around the world that do a great job, arguably better than our nation, have built in lots of time, well-designed, well-organized for professional learning by adults. You don't have to go too far so I think, has the U.S. done this well? Typically, not well, but I think we have to do it well, and I think this is a place. Now, so it's not an easy thing just to go, well, boom, just go to 3.
Right.
It may be you as a board say the way this year to solve this problem, you do, but I think it's important we spend a little time understanding how important the Superintendent's Day are, and they're not Superintendent's Days. They are staff district learning days.
So from your perspective, we don't want to drop
Sorry.
one either,
No.
because we do have to make our instructional minutes.
Right.
Which those are allowed, you know, in instructional
Yeah.
minutes, if you don't make them, they cut your state aid. So I mean,
Right.
there's a financial penalty to that. And the superintendent's conference day, and districts have been like, and you could be audited on like the use of that time. They do check, like, they're specifically for.
They
when-
count towards the
They
990
count
minutes?
toward it,
Yeah.
yeah, and we use them to get there. So without those 4 days, we could be in jeopardy of like not making our minutes either.
Just to clarify, a very simple quick, on a superintendent conference day, like March 15th, that's, the students are out, they're off?
Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
As it, it's a little oddball, but as a practical question, if there was a day of resident vacation, but would the teachers could have the superintendent's conference day on one of those days? Would
Yes.
that be possible? Is that
Yes.
something? Okay.
Yeah, it is possible to, you know, as we look at suggestions to a committee that's already met, you know, it's possible to make a superintendent's day Easter Monday.
No, I don't,
No,
you know.
I'm just saying, that would give the benefit to the residents.
Right.
And it would put the burden on attendance issues. You know, that's one, but that's not a win-win, because that was the lowest hanging fruit in the whole calendar. I think the 990 minutes is interesting because, you know, with snow days, obviously we don't immediately take a day back. Obviously, we've got a nice cushion because Ardsley gets there with 180 days, or Dobbs gets there with 3 days. It could be that, you know, our next contract could have the very unpopular trade-off of trying to put it in, you know, an hour a month. You know, teachers can show up an hour early without it being a late start. Teachers could stay an hour late without it being an early dismissal. None of those are going to go over well with a strong community, and that's for the residents. And I'd like what we were talking, this is a multi-year problem. You know, when Labor Day sneaks slowly back to a certain day, it doesn't leave that spot for last year and maybe next year. So, as Toby, you know, said, you know, precedents hurt. And, you know, every 6 years we get back here again with a Labor Day. And there are a lot of ways to make value decisions in our calendar. What was disappointing?
Monday
is one of them.
I
What?
just have one question for Dr. McCrisy, going back to Dobbs. So Dobbs also, I understand the 2 days that you mentioned, but Dobbs also ends a day earlier than we do. So is there, and I looked at the difference that you attached, that attachment, which was helpful, but the only thing I could see was that they're not allowing early dismissal on Thanksgiving. So how is it, because that's, to me, is almost technically an extra day that they have. Like, that's 3 days, because they're ending on Thursday and we're ending on Friday.
Thank you.
It's what?
It's a mistake, right?
In the Dobbs calendar?
No, on Hastings, the calendar says through the 20 whatever, but that grid says through one day earlier. But that
well-
later date is counted in the 182.
Oh, last day of, our last day of school says June 23rd on the calendar, and Dobbs's last day of school says June 22nd.
Look on the other chart.
Maybe the numbers.
I think it says, sorry, I'm not.
That's okay, no, I thought I.
We
I
would
thought
cut
I
you off
looked.
if we didn't appreciate
Please,
it.
yeah.
Isn't it different on that grid?
The grid, what, monthly
Oh, yeah, it
breakdown?
says, right, you're right, it does. It says Hastings last day the 22nd.
Yeah, but that's not the question you're asking.
There is a
Yeah.
typo.
Yeah, that's a typo on the grid. We should have caught that, but, because the.
Not on the calendar.
Right. the
I
calendar-
see.
right,
Okay,
but
so
your
they're ending on the
question
23rd and
yeah,
we're
your
ending on the
question still
23rd. Okay.
stands, and I
Yeah.
have
But
to-
maybe that's not right, because
Well,
they
yeah.
are ending on the
Sorry.
23rd, and we're ending on the 23rd, not the 22nd.
Yeah,
Got
I-
it. Okay.
I-
So we can't grab that day.
Just,
We are not sure which is which right now.
Well, I can look quickly.
I saw
I
that.
had thought they ended on the
Sorry.
23rd.
no, I should say, just in living in the real world, there are parents who take off, a day earlier, regardless of what we schedule, they'll follow their own schedule. The difference, I think, with Labor Day, with having those things early, is, there's a lot of pressure, your kids are meeting their teachers, they're meeting who's in their class, even if we all recognize it's not a lot of, direct instruction going on those days, they're very important emotionally, psychologically. So it's a question of, I feel like it's that line in Argo, the movie, like what's your best worst option, and what's all of them, and I think it is important that we don't open before Labor Day, and we have to figure out what's the entire panoply of bad options and what's the least bad one, And again, to your point, it's 2 or 3 years,
Yeah, it doesn't
and then
happen
it
every
cycles
year.
back.
But,
but-
yeah.
I agree, I agree that, we should not open before Labor Day, but I don't think taking the Easter Monday, I just want to be the voice to the silent voice that may not be here.
But for example, so just, let's say,
What I wanted to say was that I saw the first option, which I highlighted, was the breaks in February. And then I also saw that we could match, I'm just thinking that in my institution, we call it SPA Day, the Superintendent's Conference Day, which is extremely important. We cannot, SPA, we call it SPA Day. I'm not saying that we should reduce it to 4, but I'm thinking that there were some suggestions on other days. I'm not sure whether it was on what I'm looking at. I see September 1st and I see November 8th. I'm not sure what that really means, but I'm just thinking that at some point we could have a different day for it, and maybe, like Doreen said, maybe end later or something.
Yeah.
Or like Jeremy said, come early or stay late or something like that. But I don't think that, we could take one day off the February break and then,
Well, I like the general talk, because last year was a double whammy. It was an early Labor Day, and it was the Jewish holidays, putting
Right
us
after,
right up
yeah.
onto the start of the day, which was obviously a more serious condition. And we had a multi-issue, leadership events that ended up obviously in a change of superintendents, all at the same time where we had budget. So last year was much more challenging. What I do find disappointing is that the other 3 school districts are not discussing this as if it's a ridiculously difficult puzzle. There are some obvious choices that have value judgments. So I like hearing that there's 4 board members this year who have already, if I'm just quickly counting, are not in support of that value trade-off, because it is just a trade-off. You could move days before. Many states open weeks before Labor Day. We're not one of those areas. So if Bill was looking to gather input, because we don't make the calendar, obviously it's another administrative duty. I do, I think we've all seen it. Easter Monday is not a observed by all 4 school districts that we judge ourselves a lot by. And if you're looking for one more day, there are some choices that our administrators can consider. They could move a Superintendent's Day to the Friday, that last week in June. That could be one of your days. You can move 3 in front.
But we don't know
Or-
yet, we don't know yet what our last day of school is.
No, these are
It
just,
wouldn't
it could
matter.
be Friday
Yeah.
instead of it could be Friday for teachers, it's not gonna change. It could be 3 in the beginning of the year, or they might choose to go down to 3 instead of 4. I do believe those are the easiest 2 days. I've spoken, not in public and not in email to any of you guys, but, I don't appreciate the superintendent days in March. There are parents that work, and every day where you close that's not a holiday, it's another juggle day. So while it's a great time to throw a professional development in the middle of the year for teacher mental, reevaluation, those are more important days educationally than the ineffective days of June 26th, that I know that's not accurate, or kids coming before Labor Day. My family can choose to skip any day they want. And like Toby mentioned, any family that wants to, keep their vacation and miss the first days, that's a trade-off that they have to decide. They don't have to find another day to justify. For me, if you're looking for input, Easter Monday doesn't seem like a day that we can keep in our calendar. 4 superintendent days seems like a possibility going to 3. Moving the 4th day to the beginning of the year, moving the 4th day to the last day of the year. I sort of like that professionally, evaluate how your whole day went. If it had to go beyond that, I will reiterate what I said, in previous years. We have a calendar that doesn't close for the first day of Ramadan, doesn't close for Eid, doesn't close for 2 of our Hindu holidays, Diwali and Holi, doesn't close for a lot of holidays. We are culturally aware. I really like, maybe what Toby threw out there. We probably should have asterisks all over our calendar where we hope teachers aren't giving tests. And there's a lot of holidays out there that our communities observe, where I might belong to a Reform temple. Our community has conservative and Chabad, right nearby. But I do see, the issue of the second day of Rosh Hashanah is the fact that we have 3 Jewish holidays that we observe, and we are not observing some smaller religions that are out there. So in a year where we are looking to value opening after Labor Day for various reasons, I think, if they wanted to know, I think Easter Monday, 3 Superintendent's Day instead of 4, move the Superintendent's Days later early. And if none of those were administrative choices, I did want to put it out there in the open last year and this year, that is, another possible issue, that there's an imbalance that favors, my community, but I don't speak for my whole community. There's obviously conservative observations and Orthodox observations that make every religion very unique to the family. But I can't deal with being the only district that opens before Labor Day 2 years in a row. And I'm very appreciative that the administration is opening it up, and that's why we have 2 weeks to look at it, because that is a unicorn that doesn't make sense for Hastings.
I'm seeing most of the options is having Easter Monday, and I don't think, it's fair to that group that also observe Easter in that sense. But I was thinking that, I know that the spa day before Labor Day may not be, sorry, I'm calling it spa day. We have it at the beginning for us to sort of refresh. I don't know whether it's an option for that day, for the superintendent's conference day for that opening, because then it's taken care of with that. I'm open to the 2 February breaks, or one of it, and then a shift of the superintendent's day, like one of the February breaks taken away, and then a shift to one of the superintendent's day to another day. So
Well,
that's what I think.
Can I just say, I think it's just gonna come up again, obviously, so I think that whatever bad idea we come up with, it should be something that sort of, an idea we can go back
A
to.
repeating bad idea?
It won't come up, it's not gonna come up again for like 5 years, and maybe we'll be out, so we don't have to worry about it.
Alex, I couldn't
No,
really-
no, it's true.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I actually like that.
No, I think that just to recognize that whatever bad idea we come up with, it's not a durable thing that's gonna,
Yeah,
every single year.
I think I don't know if you want me to say anything more. I mean, you're getting a flavor, and hopefully the public's listening in the sense that this was a tricky one, and that's why in the supporting documents, we called it hotspot or something. I might suggest the following, which is that narrow what's on these options list. Do you have an appetite for the February break change or not? That's really options 1 and 2. You may not, meaning, similarly to negotiations, we're just looking for some guidance and then go back to the committee. So one guidance option would be to say, we definitely, and I know there are different points of view at the table, but, let's take the Easter Monday, and I know there are different points of view on that. So take that, so that's one, and to get that additional day, please go back and look at superintendent's conference days and do that in conjunction with the committee, not to subtract one, because you've heard good reasons why we can't, but it's where it's positioned. And I did check, the Dobbs Ferry that's a typo, they end on Friday the 23rd.
On 23rd.
Okay, same as us,
Yeah,
right?
so I apologize for different
That's
typos
okay.
showing up in
Yeah.
different places. So anyway, it would be, you need to sort of narrow this for us a bit, I would ask, and
Like right now, you're asking us to?
Yeah, I
'Cause
think
I
that
can
would
tell
help us, either just.
Maybe we could go around the table and everybody
I
can
can
give their
share, yeah.
opinions.
February is gonna be a bit of an issue just for a lot of high school parents because they like to go visit
Right.
colleges.
I think
Yeah.
spring is better.
And they need the 2 weekends to go do that. So I know we're gonna hear from numerous high school parents who want those 2 weekends.
Yeah,
So I think the Easter Monday is something that's more up for grabs.
Well, I think we're already saying, I think Bill's asking, if Easter Monday was gone, what would you prefer being the second savings? Bill, can I ask a question? Moving a superintendent's day from March 15th to the last day of the year doesn't get you a second day.
No.
No. So, it's not about moving March 15th to June 23rd. That is a separate priority that I would speak to. I was like, let the kids out when it's June 23rd. If you're asking for a second day, we should go around, but I don't think Damaris has set a second day. Maybe not, but I think she said, her priority would be to look at February vacation. I've mentioned a priority as well. I don't know how you want to phrase it. I would move the March 15th to the before Labor Day. Does that get us a day?
I said
That's
that, I said the
September 1,
same
right?
thing.
Right,
Would it be?
okay, yeah.
I
So,
said the same.
I don't know how you want to
So-
phrase
so
the,
why don't we just all go around? This would be my opinion, is move March 15th to September 1, and then have April 10th be a school day, and be very clear that this is not precedent setting. That's my choice.
You mean the Easter Monday?
what,
Yeah.
Yes.
oh,
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to turn, but, there's no good option, but I agree that that's, might be the best bad option. And again, a sort of recognition that it is a bad option, and, it's not, it's not a precedent in that sense, I agree with that.
I would echo what I'm saying, that I'm just trying for us to have an equitable approach. Jeremy nicely put it, we've received emails from other people observing, and not to say that I'm saying anything against the public comment that you brought up, but again, we have to listen to silent voices. There are a lot of community members that are observing a lot of other observances, I'm not saying that this suggestion will not take away anybody's holiday. It's not, we cannot diminish one holiday over another only because we don't have the voices in the room. So I would just say that the Easter Monday is not something that we should just think that we can just let it go when we are considering other religious practices. So I'm just beckoning on all of us to be consistent that way. With the February dates, I don't know anyone who holds an observance there. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's just a,
I know
there's some school district, when the calendar allows, you do full week February, full week April. It's not about observances.
Okay, so if we reduce it by one,
What do we gain, not moving the superintendent's days so early where the administrators
that's what
have
I'm saying.
spoken about it?
Exactly, and that is exactly what you also echoed. One of the holidays for February gets reduced, and then the superintendent day is not reduced from 4 to 3, but it can be the beginning, so that, because the main idea is families don't want to start before.
Are you
Friday.
saying take a day from February so that you can keep Easter Monday?
Yes.
Okay, I don't think there's,
So you're saying
I
take
don't
away,
think there's four
take away
supporting
a,
that idea.
take away a superintendent's conference day and take.
Not take
oh,
away,
No,
no.
move it up.
Move it.
Move it
Got
up.
it.
Take away another February.
Got
And
it.
then take
And take
away
a day
another
from February.
February.
Got
Like,
it,
I
okay.
have it, I'm so color coded. I have
Okay.
it
Can I
color
ask a
coded.
quick question though, Melissa? Is it ever, I'm sure this isn't gonna be a popular idea, but, is it ever possible to add, an extra hour onto a day once a month that is sort of stay and meet with teachers you need to meet day, or something like that, where, I don't know if that becomes a whole contractual thing, but that could be a way to make up a day this year, that next year.
It's definitely possible. It's also very expensive because we would have to pay them to
You
do
have to
that.
pay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, even though it's the number of.
Yeah,
Unless
it's
it
the
was
same
a
number
new-
of days.
It's the
Right,
same number of
that's what I
days.
It's
don't
the same
understand.
number of
No,
instructional
hours
hours.
Hours are very clear in the contract.
I
And
see,
they
so
wouldn't-
you
it
can't
wouldn't be
change the
considered a
hours.
day.
Okay.
Despite
so
the
let's
fact
just
that it's
see
the
where
same
we're at.
amount of
Can I
instructional
point
So
out
there are
one
two
important thing I
ideas
think we've mentioned yet? Just the idea, like taking away a date, a random date, let's say February 20th. The issue I also have is that the entire staff, teachers and administrators, parents can skip out on that day, but they can't. And it's a particularly burdensome in a very asymmetric way that I'm not very comfortable
I
with.
think you'd have an extremely low attendance if you had one day that week, say the 20th.
Right, I'm saying, but forcing, it just seems kind of cruel to force the teachers and administrators to come here to.
I mean,
Well, they
we-
couldn't come
we-
on the 20th anyway because it
I
would
don't,
be
I don't
President's
wanna be
Day.
disrespectful to Damaris's idea, but it sounded like if we went around, that one wasn't gonna hold. It sounded like Easter Monday was a lot closer to getting, more votes, so we should see, Damaris's suggestion, maybe, hold Easter Monday, take it away from February. I don't think you're gonna hear a
That
lot of
is
support.
consistent.
I don't think you're gonna hear a lot of support for that compared to
Well,
take
but
Easter
throw
Monday.
this- I'll even throw this out, as
That's
a Jew, and I like the non-precedent setting, I would say one day from Rosh Hashanah, I would be okay with for 1 year in non-precedent setting also. I'm not trying to make a
So
distinction
you do
about.
one from Rosh Hashanah and
No,
one from Easter Monday?
I would say
or-
pick one from either of those, and then make the three, I think the superintendent, as someone who does development and training for a living, I think the 3 days, while not optimal, as you said, Melissa, up front, can be very valuable, because you're at the head end of a year. You have an opportunity
better
to
than at
bring
the end,
everyone
yeah.
back, you have an opportunity to do some, some training. Would it be better to have one in March? Yes, because you spread them out, but there's still some power in that. Having a superintendent's conference on the last day of school, my
Yeah.
sense is that's dodgy, and it's just kind of it's like, let's go to a water park sort of day.
It's almost
So-
about as useful as having school when the classrooms are all packed up, though. Let's not
Well, yeah.
pretend, homework
Yeah.
stops well
Yeah.
before June
But you
23rd.
could argue that.
Classrooms
I mean,
are
school
boxed
stops
and
on
taped
June
shut.
12th,
Finish,
right.
finish, guys. But to Bill's point, there is real value, there's real value in the kids going to school, obviously, that's why we're all here. But there is real value in the adults developing as well.
Absolutely.
And, whereas the kids have 180 some days, the adults have 4. So, you know, if you take one from the kids away, it's different than taking one from the adults away, because it's just it's a sheer number. And the whole idea of, you know, let's sharpen the axe in order to chop the tree, won't keep going with that analogy. There's lots of
I like it,
problems with
actually.
So suffice it to say, while not ideal, I think it's okay, 3 up front. And then, look, I'm okay with the 10th or of April or the 27th of September, with a very large asterisk in public saying this is non-precedent setting. And I think the people that need to take those days off will take them off for this year, and it creates a solution where people aren't going back for one day, you know, that last week and not able to come to school. So that's what my proposal would be. What we could do is go around and see what other people think, but then pass it back to the committee to have some thoughts and come back with another option, you know, next week.
I want to state this for the record. I'm not saying we should take the superintendent stuff away. That's not what
No.
I'm saying. So I want to state that for the record. And also for the record, I want to state that I'm just asking for consistency. Probably we should keep record of holidays that we are chopping off, so that this time we chop this holiday, next time we chop another holiday off, if it's not going to be precedent. If it's not going to be precedent, it's not going to be precedent also for the Superintendent's Day. So I'm talking about consistency and fairness. That's all I'm saying, because we cannot just have, if we count the number of holidays that is being observed, it's not equitable across board, but hey, that's what we have right now and that's what we are working with. So we just have to be fair. That's all I'm saying.
Let's
For
send
the
something
record.
around, let everyone
Let's
talk.
just see what does everyone else think?
I would be in support of the proposal that you just made, for that to be given to Dr. McPhersey to bring back.
Good.
I'm okay with, you know, giving up Easter Monday. As a Catholic, I'm not sure what my mom would think of that, but yeah, I think that we should let that back, and I would be supportive of pushing the superintendent's conference day to the front of the year, with the caveat that I really do want to understand, to the best of you guys' knowledge, kind of what the real downfalls of that are. And I do think, I mean, I don't know if when we're saying that it's not a precedent, in the scenario where you presented that it could be either the second day of Rosh Hashanah or Easter Monday, that we're saying that it's not a precedent for both of those days. It wouldn't be a precedent, because it is true that Easter Monday is just not a day that's religiously observed, I would say, as broadly, and certainly not within it's not even included in the New York City School of Calendars, which is probably the most robust in terms of many, many faiths that are represented in their school calendar. So that to me is kind of a tell, when you are not just speaking about the regional trends within Westchester, but in a much more broad regional way. For me, that's why I think it's, you know, this is a secular position, you know, and while I certainly want to be representative of various faith communities, you know, times are changing, we have to compromise, and that's our charge. So for me, I would say Easter Monday probably is not going to be very compelling in years moving ahead, because it's not going to be that more districts are going to be embracing that. And I do think that moving the professional development days to the front end of the calendar would be something that I'd be more inclined, again, once we've heard back from the committee in terms of how that looks.
My opinion is that a calendar should represent the community that it's in. I wouldn't think that, you know, maybe a school district in Alabama might not celebrate the Jewish holidays, and I would think that would make sense. You know, that people don't make sense.
Upstate New York.
Yes. So there's that. I would love to know at some point, I don't know how we could do this, what the makeup of our community is. I know there's a large Jewish population. I know we've talked about Muslim holidays before. I really don't know what size, or the Hindu population, I don't know what those size of those communities are in our district. So it's hard to say, you know, who should be represented with official holidays or not. Right now, we're doing Judeo-Christian holidays. The secular answer is to get rid of all holidays. You know, this is the separation of church and state. Why do we have any holidays on there? Why do we have any religious holidays on there?
Well, because some of them are federal holidays.
Yes, but some of them,
we have to build around that.
Only Christmas.
Only Christmas, I think. What else is a federal holiday for that's
No,
religious?
I'm just talking about.
No, I'm talking about religious holidays. If we wanted to be fair, we don't have any religious holidays holidays at all. Like, that's the most equitable thing, is to take away all
It
religious
wouldn't
holidays.
affect it, because it's only.
So, right, well, no, because then you take 3 Jewish holidays and Easter Monday. Because we're hearing from community members that they're like, well, I'm Muslim, I'm Hindu, where are my holidays?
I
And
understand.
so we're just gonna, I see this, we want a diverse community, and all that's gonna happen is we're gonna like make our calendar insane. So the easiest thing is to be like, there's no religious holidays on the calendar, you have none, that's it, sorry. Which doesn't make sense at all for our community, that's not what anybody wants, I'm just saying, in the future, we've gotta figure this out. So that being said, when I look at the next part of it, I think, what is most burdensome for the parents in our community? And the burdensome days are days that are not federal holidays, where parents have to go to work. In general, where parents have a traditional job where they would get off on federal holidays. So things like March 15th and Easter Monday are burdensome for our community, because parents most likely do not have those days off, and they have to find some sort of childcare. So when I look at the calendar and I try to figure that out, and it's the same thing, frankly, for the Jewish holidays, except that we have a large population of Jews in our community, so the parents are probably taking that off. I asked around for my friends who are Jewish, is the second day important for you? And it was a mixed bag. For some people, it was very important, and for some people, it wasn't. When it came to what is more important for you, so having the second day off or starting school after Labor Day, the answer was, starting school after Labor Day. So maybe those are the less religious Jews, I don't know. So my point is, I think that if I want to represent my community, and what I've heard is starting after Labor Day is non-negotiable. That has to happen. So in order to do that, we need to find 2 days. And when I look at my community and how I don't want to put an unadded burden on them, I say that I would like to take off March 15th and April 10th, and that's what I see. I think that the February break, the week, and the April break, the week, are really important to people in our communities. So that's why I would not take from those dates. So that's my opinion.
I like, well stated, I like that with that information, although you did not vote for the February date. I like clarity,
Gotcha.
That's me, even if I'm wrong, but I like that you well stated it. And
Well,
it sounded fair to me.
Yeah, and that is.
I'll go around, let's just keep it going this way. Excited by the option of moving a superintendent day in front of Labor Day. That only means we have to find one more. I didn't like the way the proposal was said, whether it's Easter Monday or Rosh Hashanah. I believe it has to be Easter Monday, way before we go into actual religious holidays. That is not consistent.
Be careful.
Be
Some people
careful.
consider it
No,
Easter
it is
Monday an
not.
actual
It is not. I
religious
looked,
holiday.
it's not an observable holiday. It's, if you read, there's no observations there. I'm obviously wrong many times.
Yes.
We
I
are
can't wait to
Talk
get
about
those.
bad
I'm the
options, might as well be
communications
wrong,
person. I'm gonna have to monitor all those emails from people.
Exactly.
Thanks,
Jeremy.
Jeremy.
I'll take strike everything. I'm in,
Now you're starting to see the system.
Exactly.
Right.
Now
Jeez,
you're getting it.
I'm in favor of,
What a change.
I'm in favor of going from 4 superintendent's days to 3. That's not something you propose. I'm in favor of moving the superintendent's day before Labor Day. If we need to find a second day, I'm in favor of the not consistent getting rid of Easter Monday. It's not across all 4 river towns. What is consistent is 3 Jewish holidays in the beginning of the year. I'm excited that this year does not present a challenge to us with the suggestions of moving a superintendent's day up. All we have to do is join the other districts in our community that have 5 days off in February, 5 days off in April, and I'm excited that the calendar process came to us early enough that we're actually getting revisions this year, because last year we got no revisions, and we did not meet the needs of many families. So I wouldn't put it as an either or. I wouldn't say it's not precedent setting. I think it is precedent setting. I think the 4 river towns do go to school on Easter Monday, and they do not go to school on second day of Rosh Hashanah.
That
So
is
in
not equity. I'll just say.
I
Let's just
agree.
keep moving though. Let's
No.
keep growing.
No,
Let's
no,
go,
no,
let's
I-
go.
No,
You
I'm not
can't
done.
keep
I'm
doing
not
this
done.
over and
No,
over
no,
I'm not
again.
done.
He's
I
not
believe in
done yet,
I
but-
believe in a calendar that is not equity. it is quite obvious, we are not taking off every religious holiday.
I
So I'm not
understand.
looking for equity, I'm not looking for alternating between Easter Monday and any other holiday. Easter Monday is easy for me to support. Move a superintendent's day or cut a superintendent's day.
Okay, Alex, please.
I support your proposal, which is to move to September 1st, the superintendent's conference day, keep 4, and to drop the Easter Monday, not precedent setting in the sense that it doesn't happen every single year. So I agree with your proposal.
Doc, I'm not going to, I have a comment. I'm a board, I can comment anytime I want to, and I cannot be stopped.
Well, you
I'm
can't
not-
comment any kind
No,
of time.
no,
you
I'm,
can comment
about,
board comments.
board comments, that's what I'm
But we're
saying.
not
So
there
don't, no, you can't stop me. I know the
I'm
rules.
not trying to stop you, I'm just.
I'm not talking about
We're a
Easter.
quarter of the way through the agenda.
You cannot stop me.
Okay.
Stop it. I'm not, I just want to say this for the record. I'm not saying this because I'm married to the Easter. I'm talking about the fact that if we say there are emails that have come in from Hindus, from Muslims, from all of this, of these other religious groups that are asking about these things, right? So I'm saying that we need to be consistent. I like the way Doreen explained it. It was clear, it was fair. But if we say that, oh, this group does this and this group does that, and Dobbs Ferry does this and this person does that, then we are choosing and picking. It's not fair. That's what I'm saying. You can't say one time is convenient to use these, another time is convenient to use Alabama, another time is convenient to use this. It becomes confirmation bias standpoint. I'm just saying that, again, Doreen was very good at giving that clarity and arguing the points through, and that is what I want to state, that
What do you propose for this time?
I don't care what we choose right now. At the end of the day, I'll just be one person. But all I'm saying is that when we are talking about certain things concerning making decisions that is equitable, we should be consistent. That's all I'm saying. And give understanding that merits are consistent and not just to poo-poo something away that, oh, whatever. That is not, we can go listen to this whole video again. That's all I'm saying. I don't care if we take, it's not holidays that makes anybody else's faith, but all I'm saying is all the faith that I'm connected to. But I'm just saying that we should learn to be fair and consistent in the reasons why we give behind what we are saying we are going to do. That's all.
I think you make a good point. I think the point about, what gets put on, what's not put on, it's very muddy right now. It's not really been clarified for a variety of reasons. I think the last couple years has really brought more of that into clear focus. We opened up the conversation about Eid and Holi and Diwali last year, and it never really got resolved. It just got tossed out there. And so there's got to be some other systemic way to really think about this. We haven't solved that yet. We're not going to solve it tonight, but your point is well taken. Damaris, your point is well taken, Doreen, and I think we need to think about that. Let's try to get to this calendar done, and the only reason I said non-precedent setting was whatever we make a decision on now, 2024, it's the 2nd of September. We're not going to be having this same debate. But we may be having a broader debate about what gets included from a holiday perspective, or a broader discussion about what gets included. I think we should have that. We don't need to have that this year, but I think you both make great points about that we should have that conversation.
Can I just make one point about the calendar for the community to understand? Is that I like how the calendar is laid out this year, because the calendar here is a tool, and it shows what days we have off and what days we don't. Last year we had, like, Lunar New Year, for instance, was put in, and Diwali. Some were, but others weren't. We didn't have the day off. They were just listed there, and I think that gets very confusing, and that gets very muddy.
Yep.
So I like that this calendar simply states what days we have off and why. And I think that's important. And to Dr. McCursey's point, all those other holidays are celebrated and talked about in school, and that's different. That's a different way of approaching it. But just so the community understands, that's why those dates and those other holidays are not listed here. This is a tool to understand what days we have off and why.
Okay, so I think we've got enough information, right, to...
Can I say one thing, a separate point that we have not brought up yet? One other thing mentioned in the supporting documents was the idea of potentially moving from 6 minutes between classes to 4 to recapture the half-day before, Thanksgiving. Is that something that's, I wasn't quite sure from the documentation, is that something?
Yeah, I
that-
mean, transparency matters. It also means you see things that we haven't sorted out, so I'm glad we're transparent. No, meaning that,
Sure.
no, it was great, because we put it out there intentionally, which was in the committee, was raise the idea, could you shorten passing time to gain some other minutes? And that, it gets complicated in a whole set of ways.
Okay.
So I'm glad it came up, and I'm glad we left it in the notes for future records. So it's a good question, but it was intentionally kind of left it, let's,
Okay.
at the bottom to say, don't discard it, but let's come back to it, but not for this year. So, okay, I think what I hear is a charge, which is to address Easter Monday as one day, and I know there are mixed feelings about that, and then to look at the superintendent's conference day option for this year, and all of this clearly be stated as not precedent setting, and then come back to you all with an updated recommendation on the calendar, and have that to you, ideally the Wednesday before the Monday you meet. And I think if the board's comfortable with that, we typically make things to you public Friday, but if you want it made public Wednesday, we can do that, just so the community is clearly knowing at least several days before the Monday meeting. Actually, though, is that Tuesday then? Is it this month, is it a Tuesday? Anyway, you'll get fair warning. So the only question I'm asking technically is we tend to get things to you ideally Wednesday that are significant, and then put it in the public by end of the day Friday.
Yeah, but this one seems smaller. It's not a lot to dig into. We'll
Yeah.
see it
Plus,
right
there've been a
away
lot of
within the
comments,
first
so not
calendar.
leaving people wondering would help.
Any
Okay.
day sounds
All right.
good, whenever the next proposal
Right,
comes out.
So, we'll, I'm sorry? Yeah, that's right, it's next month that we have that issue, right? Yeah, sorry, I feel like it's April already, sorry.
The weather.
Yeah,
So
okay.
since we've discussed this at length already, maybe just for the next discussion that we have, since we're going to approve it, whatever comes before us, maybe if you could address then, and I know it's in the documents, but some people have emailed about it, just to understand why the calendar doesn't get constructed until now. Not now, you don't have to,
Well,
you don't
it's-
have
it
to address
isn't-
it right now, but
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
in my
repeated
email.
question,
No,
because
I'm
people
sorry,
are
it's-
people always ask, like, why can't we do it in December?
Yeah, so
You know,
I-
and it can't
yeah,
happen in
so
December, but people don't understand.
No,
So
that's
if you could
fine,
address
but,
that.
and I purposely put that in the memo
I
to the
know.
public.
But I don't think everybody reads the
Yeah,
memos.
so,
Dr. McCursey.
no, and I was gonna make the final comment be that.
They don't.
No, and so,
Is that
we
wrong
can
to
say it
say?
again, but right, we would love to do it earlier, but we can't. There are a lot of very big reasons. One is called BOCES, two is called New York State, and for both of those, it's called testing
Right,
schedules.
the regions.
And then we do need to be, witness how much we talked about the other districts tonight. They all, I mean, I don't think it's lemmings, maybe not, I don't think. But we're all, that's supposed to be a joke.
Safety in
We're all
numbers.
setting the schedule this time of year tied to New York State and tied to BOCES. And I did put out to my colleagues, could we do this for 2-year cycles? Because across the border, they do these for 2-year cycles. For some reason, we're not there yet. So the simple answer is because of New York State, because of BOCES, we have to do it in March. I don't even know if we can cheat it into February.
couldn't
We
do
couldn't
it.
get any earlier than
Is it-
February.
Is it possible, Dr. McCursey, for the superintendents to go to the state and say, we would like this information earlier so we can make our calendar earlier? I mean, it comes up every year. It's what the,
It's a test, really.
but why can't New York State figure that out earlier?
I mean, there's all kinds of things we ask on.
Not
and
their
I-
priority.
Yeah,
But it's the priority for their constituents.
Oh, and it's been asked and asked and asked, so it's not a new
Yeah.
question. And I don't know, Melissa, if you want to
Yeah,
speak to it, I mean,
can.
it's been asked
I
a
mean,
lot.
We did
And we asked
actually,
again this time.
This year, we conducted outreach to our BOCES colleagues, and we asked the question, might it be possible for you to liaise with New York State? And, you know, it's been a challenge. I think, you know, I don't know all of the details, but I know that with state testing, they interface with vendors, there's timelines, they have to make sure the tests are valid and reliable. It's a little complicated, I would guess, with the timeline. At this time, they weren't able to have, to work with the state to create a multi-year, you know, projection, which is what we were really hoping for.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it really only matters the years that Labor Day looks a weird
Yeah,
date. You know, it's Labor Day is late, but it does affect the community.
I mean, most districts, Connecticut, they're setting them this time of year, but they do often do the 2-year. I just did a scan of Catholic schools, by the way, what they do with Easter, you know, and they still have preliminary up for their calendars next year unless they are doing, this time of year, it's not ideal, but that's
Yeah.
kind of when.
Again, it just goes back to what the community parents have to pay for camp. They're working parents figuring out what they're doing with their kids over the summer, and camps fill up. And if you don't do it, then
Right.
you're in trouble. So that's,
Yep.
you know, it's not just about having a vacation.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on to business items. Anybody have any questions about business items under 6A?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve items 1 and 2 under 6A?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Do I have a motion to approve 6B, placement for services for CSE and CPSE?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Personnel. Does anybody have any comments about?
Good night.
About 7A through D?
No.
I just want to acknowledge Debbie Martin. She's been here for 33 years and retiring this year. I know she's.
That's an awesome number, 33.
Yeah.
That's quite a number.
That's a lot of students.
For your wonderful service dating back to the 80s. Wow. Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments on 7A through D? Do you have a motion to approve personnel items under 7A through D?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Minutes. Anyone have questions about minutes from the 228 meeting? We have a motion to approve minutes from 228, 2022?
Yep.
Second?
Second?
All in favor? Policy first read. Policy committee want to say anything about these documents?
Yeah, I could say some stuff about it, and I think Dr. McKessie may say more, but there were two things that was brought to our attention that I just want to mention those two out, which had to do with the public comment at the beginning, that we thought that it should be, priority should be given to agenda items, and then that same first public comment, they could also talk about things that concerns them, so that it's not just about the agenda. So right now, as it stands, the public comment is just about the agenda, which doesn't serve holistically the needs of our community. So I think that will be done at some point. And then I don't think we have, Dr. Marquez, you did not include the board comment piece here, right? We are going to work on that later on?
Well, that's in a separate piece. We did get guidance on that as to whether it makes sense to, in a policy, distinguish the board.
Yeah,
Because
but-
you have full access and opportunity to make
Correct.
comment
Correct.
regardless of what the policy says.
Exactly.
So the legal guidance on this was you may not want to, was that for the agenda setting or the comment?
It was the comment
Yeah.
part, we had the agenda one, but the concern was that it wasn't in line with what a collective board should be about, and it sounded very corporate. So we did not think it was appropriate at all. So you said you were going to check with legal.
No, I did, so, right, so what, was that within this one or the agenda setting one?
I can't remember, Doreen, do
I
you
thought it was the
remember?
agenda
Yeah, I think that was
setting one.
I think it was
It
the
was
agenda
within the
setting one that you were
agenda setting one.
checking.
Yes, and I had to
Okay.
have an answer on that, so yeah.
Okay, that's good. All right, so that's the only
And-
two that concerned me.
And
but-
there was a question also on public comment, whether or not you have to be a resident, and you do not need to be
To
a
be a
resident.
resident, yes,
Right.
that's what it says as well, so we wanted to make sure we clarify that. Other than that, those were the three main things that I wanted to just state out again for the record, but
Could you
there's
guys,
more.
can you say that again? So currently, we were thinking, we were trying to make our first public comment be about agenda items, and our
Only.
second one being completely open.
That's what it currently
And-
is.
And are we saying that's not a good idea to continue that?
That was changed last year.
Right, and we're saying now that structure doesn't match with what is consistent in other areas, and we should just leave both comments to be open?
Yeah, and
Okay.
then the priority is given to agenda item.
Priority.
The
Yeah.
first comment, public comment, the priority has to be, if we have 1,000 people here, we
You would
would want
say who is speaking to an
those
agenda
speaking
item.
first will be people speaking to and about the agenda item. And then after that, if we intend to extend it, if the 30 minutes is not yet up, then it could be about other things pertaining to the district. But the second part.
So it's not
would-
just, right, it's not
The-
first
the
people to
reasoning-
email Maureen, it's not the first
Right.
10 people to email Maureen, we'll do priority, but we're not gonna limit it. If somebody wanted to speak off agenda item, they can speak in the first one. Thank you, guys.
The reasoning for that was that sometimes the meetings run long, I mean, believe it or not.
Yeah, if you wanna talk off, if you wanted to talk off
So if you wanna,
topic,
right,
and
so
you
if you
didn't
wanna,
wait.
exactly, you have to wait, and it didn't seem fair, so that was the reasoning.
Sounds
And if I
clear.
may,
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and again, I'm more facilitating, but I think I think the committee arrived at a good compromise here. which is not to
Prioritizing, not
totally- yeah,
eliminating.
You got it.
I like it, guys, thank you.
And regarding the gender-neutral bathrooms, and this is an official policy, but it really doesn't affect us because we have single-use ones already, and they already say it, so we're not adding or changing anything. It's really, I think this is required, but it's nothing new for us because we already have it, so.
Okay. Second public comment, pass, board comments?
Yeah, I'd make a comment. I really do appreciate the way the 7 of us are able to talk directly and get to the points. As it relates to the calendar, I found this discussion much more helpful and transparent than last year's, where it wasn't clear what revisions we were asking for. So to the 6 of you and to the 12 of us, or the 15 of us, when we bring in others, I found the discussions to be well-focused and well-led, and I appreciate where we're at as we enter March.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think that the community understands that there's no ideal calendar and there's going to be compromise from everybody. So if you want to start school afterwards, everybody has to figure out how they're compromising.
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, sorry, so moved.
Second?
Second.
Adjourn.
It was
Have a
just
beautiful
loud.
week.
It was just